The quad erupts and screams. A body hits the cobblestones with a wet, heavy thud. Goh Jae-won stands in the middle of the courtyard, a thin wisp of smoke curling from the barrel of a black pistol that doesn't belong in this world. His hand trembles, not from fear, but from the jagged bolt of pain ripping through his chest. The bully who cornered him 2 minutes ago lies motionless, a perfect coin-sized hole burned through his magical barrier and his sternum both. No one can cast a spell, not after seeing a D-tier nobody one-shot an A-tier shield like it's wet paper. Jae-won gasps and looks down at his own hand. A thin, dark crack spiders across the back of his wrist, where the skin wasn't creased before. He feels a year of his life gone, sucked into the gun's hungry steel. The Academy's golden banners flutter in the breeze, but the courtyard is frozen. 50 students staring at a magicless scholarship boy holding death in his grip. Jae-won's lungs burn. His reflection in a window catches him off guard. He looks exactly the same, but something behind his eyes is older now. His knuckles are white on the grip. Nobody moves. The bully's friends, 3 kids from the Hae-in family, drop their casting hands and stumble backwards. Someone whispers, "What is that thing?" And the words ripple through the crowd like a curse. Jae-won stuffs the pistol into his jacket, turns on his heel, and walks. His heart slams against his ribs. Each beat a countdown he didn't ask for. 3 years ago, Goh Jae-won was just a scholarship kid who scrubbed cauldrons to pay his fees. He arrived at Celestia Academy with a broken suitcase and 0 magical aptitude. The only student in 2 decades admitted without a tier rating. His sister Yoon Mi-ra pinned a good luck charm to his collar at the train station. She kissed his forehead and promised to visit every month. 2 weeks later, the Academy sent a letter. Yoon Mi-ra had died in a training incident off campus. No body was returned, no investigation was opened, and the headmaster personally told Jae-won to stop asking questions. He didn't stop. He learned to keep his head down, to take the taunts from kids who could cast fireballs before they could read, to smile when professors called him the charity case. Behind the quiet mask, he searched every corner of the Academy for 3 years, chasing any scrap of paper that might explain what they did to his sister. He found nothing but locked doors and polite threats. Until tonight. The sealed vault beneath the library was supposed to be a myth. Jae-won heard about it from a drunk janitor who got fired the next day, but not before mumbling about experiments the old mages sealed up and forgot. It took him 11 months to locate the entrance, a false floor behind. 3rd row of restricted texts, covered by an invisibility ward, so old it flickered like a dying bulb. He slipped through at 3 a.m., crawling on his stomach, down a spiral staircase of black stone that got colder the deeper he went. The vault itself was small, a room barely larger than his dorm closet, lit by a single, pulsing blue crystal embedded in the ceiling. Shelves lined the walls, holding dusty jars of dried herbs, a cracked summoning orb, 3 books written in a language his eyes couldn't parse. And in the center of the room, resting on a carved obsidian pedestal, sat the pistol. It wasn't like the flintlocks in the Academy Museum. This thing was sleek, angular, made of a matte black metal that seemed to drink light. Beside it, a bronze plaque bore an inscription, the letters etched deep enough to read with his fingertips. Each bullet buys a year of your life. Jae-won's first instinct was to leave it. His second instinct, the one that remembered his sister's name, reached out and picked it up. It was weightless in his grip, like it had been waiting exactly for his hand. The metal warmed against his skin. He tucked it into his waistband and climbed back up into a world that owed him answers. The training dummy stood in the abandoned East Wing, a leftover from the Academy's war-era combat drill. Jae-won had used it a dozen times for basic staff practice, always limping away with bruised ribs because he couldn't cast a barrier spell like the other students. This time was different. He raised the pistol, lined up the sight, and squeezed the trigger. The report was a flat, dead crack. Not gunpowder, not thunder, but something in between. A bolt of dark energy lanced out, punched through the dummy's reinforced chest plate, and kept going. The dummy didn't break. It disintegrated, reduced to a fine gray powder that drifted to the floor like snow. Jae-won stared at the pile, his ears ringing. Then he caught his reflection in a cracked mirror on the wall and froze. A single strand of hair at his left temple had turned bone white. He touched it, pulled it taut in front of his eyes, and felt the cold truth settle into his stomach. The plaque wasn't a warning intended to scare thieves away. It was a receipt. The courtyard shooting spreads through the Academy faster than any spell. By the time Jae-won reaches his dorm building, students part around him like he's carrying plague. Some stare at the bulge in his jacket where the pistol sits. Others just stare at his face, searching for the monster that killed a B-tier bully without breaking a sweat. Kwon Do-yoon intercepts him halfway up the stairs. Kwon is everything Jae-won isn't. Tall, athletic, his council badge gleaming on his chest. His fire element aura bright enough to warm the air 3 feet around him. He blocks the landing with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Kwon asks where Jae-won got the weapon. Jae-won's heart is still hammering from the shot, his chest wound throbbing like a fresh burn under his shirt. But he keeps his face blank and shrug. He tells Kwon he doesn't know what he's talking about. Kwon's smile tightens. His eyes flick down, once, to the shape pressing against Jae-won's jacket. 1 second of silence stretches into 5. Kwon steps aside and gestures for him to pass, but the look on his face says this conversation isn't over. Jae-won climbs the last flight of stairs alone. Behind him, he hears Kwon murmur something to a stone-faced enforcer who melts out of the shadows near the stairwell. He's being tailed now. Of course he's being tailed. His joints ache as he walks. The price of that first shot is already settling into his bones. A deep, grinding fatigue that a 19-year-old shouldn't feel. His left knee pops with every other step. He drags himself past a window and catches his reflection in the glass. The white hair is still just 1 strand. The skin around his eyes seems thinner, pinched in a way it wasn't an hour ago. This is the cost. Every time he pulls that trigger, death takes a payment in advance. Jae-won locks his dorm room door, shoves his desk chair under the handle, and collapses onto his bed. He pulls the pistol from his jacket and lays it on the blanket in front of him. In the dim orange light of his desk lamp, the thing looks almost alive. Faint lines of script pulse along the barrel, glyphs he didn't notice in the vault's blue glow. He opens the magazine like the plaque's inscription taught him, counting with his fingertip. 12 bullets remain. 11 kills. If each one costs a year, enough for the council, enough for the professors. 1 for Headmaster Ma Jun-hyuk, the man who sent his sister into that training incident and came back alone. Jae-won's grip tightens on the grip until his knuckles ache. He doesn't know how long he has left. A decade. Maybe less if the damage compounds. But he knows exactly what he's going to spend it on. Outside his window, the Academy's towers glitter against the night sky. And somewhere in the tallest spire, a headmaster is still breathing. Jae-won chambers around, shoves the pistol under his pillow, and closes his eyes. Tomorrow, the hunt begins. Jae-won's footsteps echo through the library's marble halls long after midnight. Forbidden Section sits behind an iron gate wound through with silver wards. He's picked locks before, but never wards, so he does the smart thing. He goes around. The old ventilation shaft behind the west wall is rusted, but passable. He hauls himself through, drops into a dusty reading room lit by a single dying candle. Shelves tower twice his height, crammed with scrolls so ancient the leather bindings flake at a touch. And there, behind a desk piled with books in 3 dead languages, sits Shim Byung-taek. Shim is ancient in a way that has nothing to do with age. His left eye is milky and dead, his right eye sharp as a hawk's. He doesn't look surprised to see a student crawling out of his air ducts at 2 in the morning. He says Jae-won's been making quite a name for himself. Jae-won freezes halfway out of the vent, one hand still on the grate. Shim gestures to a chair and pours tea from a pot that's been boiling since before Jae-won was born. The old librarian asks if he's here about the weapon. Jae-won's hand twitches toward his jacket, but Shim waves it off. He says he's not interested in confiscating anything, and he's not loyal to the headmaster. What he is, he explains, is the last person alive who knows what Jae-won is carrying. He pulls a leather-bound journal from under his desk. The cover is burned along the edges, the pages yellow and brittle. Shim opens it to a sketch that makes Jae-won's blood run cold. It's the pistol. Every angle, every glyph, every line of script along the barrel drawn in precise ink. Beneath the drawing, a single word in old script, Soul Eater. Jae-won's voice is hoarse when he asks what that means. Shim pours himself more tea and says the gun isn't just a weapon. It's a parasite, forged to consume the user's soul energy with every shot. The damage is cumulative, and it is permanent. Each bullet buys exactly 1 year, taken from the end of the shooter's life. Fire 6 shots, lose 6 years. And there's no magic in this world or any other that can give them back. Jae-won's fingers drift to the white strand at his temple. Thinks about the 2 shots he's already fired, the crack on his wrist, the ache in his joints. 2 years gone and he hasn't even started yet. Shim's good eye studies him like he's a specimen under glass. He says the gun was crafted with immense power, something beyond standard magical forging. This isn't Academy work, he adds, and it isn't even from this world. Jae-won leans forward, his chair scraping against the stone floor. He asks the question he's been carrying since he first read that bronze plaque. Who made it, and why does the headmaster's name keep surfacing around his sister's death? The color drains from Shim's face like someone pulled a plug. His teacup rattles against the saucer, and he sets it down with deliberate care. For a long moment, the only sound is the candle flames sputtering between them. Shim says the name Ma Jun-hyuk isn't spoken lightly in this room. He tells Jae-won he's already said too much, and that some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. Jae-won slams his palm on the desk hard enough to send papers fluttering. He tells the old man his sister is dead and he's already dying. The door isn't just open, it's off its hinges, and the headmaster is standing on the other side. Shim closes his eyes, and when he opens them, there's something like pity in the good one. He mutters two words that change everything. Gate project. Before Jae-won can ask what that means, the candle gutters and dies. Footsteps in the hall, and they're not trying to be quiet. Shim moves faster than a man his age should. He shoves the journal into Jae-won's hands and points to a shelf that swings outward on hidden hinges. A narrow passageway, dark and smelling of wet stone. Shim tells him to go now, and not to stop until he's in the maintenance tunnels. Jae-won hesitates, his hand on the passage wall, and asks why the old man is helping him. Shim's good eye glints in the darkness. He says he watched 3 students die in those experiments before anyone noticed. He's been waiting 20 years for someone to pick up that gun. Jae-won disappears into the passage, just as the reading room door splinters inward. 2 council enforcers step through the wreckage, with badges gleaming and fire spells already crackling in their palms. They ignore Shim completely, their heads swiveling toward the swinging bookshelf. Jae-won runs. The passage dumps him out into the library's main stacks. 3 floors of towering shelves arranged like a labyrinth. Perfect cover, except the enforcers are already flanking him. One drops from the balcony overhead with a gravity spell that cracks the marble floor under Jae-won's feet. Second enforcer materializes from the shadows near the eastern stairwell. They've got him boxed in, no vents to crawl through, no unlocked doors in sight. The taller one speaks first, his voice flat and bored, like he's done this 100 times. He says Jae-won is to come quietly for questioning regarding the death of a student and possession of a prohibited artifact. Jae-won's fingers curl around the grip of the pistol inside his jacket. He asks if any student ever comes back from the headmaster's questioning. The enforcer doesn't answer, which is answer enough. Jae-won draws the pistol, aims at the taller enforcer's leg, and squeezes the trigger. The report is that same dead flat crack, a sound that shouldn't exist in a world of fireballs and barrier spells. A bolt of dark energy punches through the enforcer's hastily raised shield like it's made of paper. It doesn't hit his leg because Jae-won's aim is shaky from the recoil, but it tears a chunk out of his thigh. The enforcer screams and drops, his leg a mess of blood and splintered bone. The second enforcer lunges with a lightning spell already arcing between his fingers. Jae-won pivots, his left knee screaming in protest, and fires again. This one he doesn't aim for the leg. The bolt catches the enforcer square in the chest, right over his council badge. His barrier spell activates a half-second too late, and then shatters, the dark energy punching straight through. The enforcer hits the marble floor already dead. A neat, smoking hole where his heart used to be. Jae-won drops to one knee and vomits a thin stream of blood onto the polished stone. The pain in his chest is a white-hot spike, worse than the first shot by a factor of 3. He touches his left temple and finds 3 more strands of white, stark against the black. A year for the first enforcer and a year for the second. He's down 4 now total, and he can feel every single one of them settling into his bones. The wounded enforcer is still conscious, dragging himself backward across the floor with terror in his eyes. He gasps out that Jae-won is a monster and that the headmaster will find him. Jae-won stands up slowly, wipes the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. He tells the enforcer to deliver a message. Tell Ma Jun-hyuk that the Soul Eater remembers its creator and it's coming home. He kicks the enforcer's communication charm off his belt and crushes it under his heel. Then he's moving again because the gunshots weren't quiet and the whole academy is about to wake up. He hits the emergency exit on the east wall and shoulder checks the door open into the courtyard. Fog rolls thick across the grass, the kind of unnatural gray mist that means someone's tampering with the weather. Good. He can use the cover. Across the quad, lights are flickering on in the dormitories and council barracks. Shouts echo between the buildings, and someone's already casting a searchlight spell that sweeps the grounds in blue arcs. Jae-won cuts left toward the maintenance shed, half hidden behind the old greenhouse. A figure steps out of the fog ahead of him, tall and athletic with fire aura warming the air. Kwon Do-yoon. He's not blocking the path, just standing there with his arms crossed and his council badge catching the searchlight. Jae-won raises the pistol, his arm trembling from fatigue and recoil damage. Kwon doesn't move, doesn't even blink. He just stares at Jae-won's face, at the new lines around his mouth, and the silver threading through his hair. Kwon says Jae-won looks 10 years older than he did this afternoon. Jae-won's finger tightens on the trigger, but he doesn't fire. Something in Kwon's expression stops him. Something that's not quite hostile and not quite friendly. Kwon says the headmaster will have every enforcer on the grounds hunting him within the hour. He should run, hide, and pray the old man gets bored before Jae-won runs out of bullets. Then Kwon steps aside and melts back into the fog like he was never there. Jae-won doesn't waste time wondering why. He bolts for the maintenance shed, wrenches the door open, and drops through the trapdoor into the tunnels below. Cold and the dark swallow him whole. He counts his ammunition by touch in the pitch black, his fingers moving over the magazine's grooves. 10 bullets remain, and 10 years of his life if he fires them all. He's already spent 4, and his body feels like it's been hollowed out with a spoon. His heart pounds irregularly, skipping beats in a rhythm that would terrify any doctor. Joint pain has spread from his left knee to both wrists and the base of his spine. He leans against the damp tunnel wall and lets himself slide down until he's sitting in the mud. The journal Shim gave him is still tucked inside his jacket, digging into his ribs. He pulls it out and uses a faint flicker of light from a phosphorescent moss to read the first page. The handwriting is sharp and angular, and the first entry is dated 22 years ago. It describes the arrival of a strange artifact through an unstable portal, a weapon that shouldn't exist. The writer notes that Headmaster Ma Jun-hyuk has taken personal custody of the object and forbidden all further study. And then, in smaller script beneath the entry, a single line that makes Jae-won's breath catch. Initial testing suggests the artifact requires a human soul as its anchor. A female subject has been selected and preparation is underway. Jae-won closes the journal and presses his forehead against the cold tunnel wall. He doesn't know if the subject was his sister, but he knows in his gut that it was. The pistol in his hand feels suddenly heavier, like it's carrying more than just metal and dark magic. It's carrying Mira, and the weight of that is almost enough to break him. Somewhere above, boots pound across the maintenance shed floor. The enforcers have found the trapdoor. Jae-won pushes himself upright, tucks the journal back into his jacket, and starts limping deeper into the darkness. His left knee pops with every other step, and his heart is still doing that terrifying skip beat thing. But he's got 10 bullets, a name, and a direction. The hunt isn't over, and neither is he. He spends 3 days in the tunnels, and he doesn't waste a single hour. The journal pages become his roadmap, and every entry is a brick in the wall he's building against the headmaster. Shim's notes are meticulous, the work of a man who knew he'd be dead before he could use them himself. One entry catches his eye on the second day, and it changes everything. The annual Celestia Combat Tournament isn't just a spectacle for the noble families and their fat purses. The winner gets access to the council's sealed records vault without supervision or restriction. That means evidence. The kind of evidence that can't be disappeared by an enforcer with a fire spell and a grudge. Jae-won traces the tournament bracket in the journal's margin and starts planning. His face is already on every wanted poster in the academy, so walking through the front door isn't an option. But the tournament has a tradition, and traditions are holes in any security system. Contestants can enter anonymously under a fighting name if they pass the preliminary power assessment. Masked fighters are rare, but they're not unheard of, and the crowd loves a mystery. The prelims are in 2 days in the East Arena, and Jae-won needs to be there. He raids the maintenance shed above the tunnels for supplies, after the enforcer search moves to the outer grounds. A black mechanic's cloak hangs on a hook near the boiler, and it's heavy enough to hide his frame. He finds a welding mask with a cracked visor and swaps the glass for a dark lens from a broken searchlight. The getup isn't pretty, but it'll hold long enough, and nobody looks twice at maintenance staff anyway. 2 days later, he walks into the East Arena registration tent with the hood up and the mask on. The registrar is a bored-looking third year with a clipboard and a magical scanner humming on the table beside him. She asks for his name, and Jae-won tells her he's entering under the alias Black Trigger. She doesn't blink, just writes it down and waves the scanner over his torso. The device reads his magical signature and beeps out a null result so flat it makes her frown. She asks if he knows this is a magic combat tournament and not a boxing match. Jae-won tells her he knows exactly what it is, and she shrugs and stamps his entry pass anyway. Null signature fighters usually get obliterated in the first round, and the crowd loves that too. The prelim bracket posts on the announcement board an hour later, and Jae-won finds his name at the bottom. Black Trigger versus a B-tier fire mage named Hyun Jun Seo, who's been bragging about his win streak all week. Jae-won memorizes the match time and disappears back into the crowd before anyone gets a good look at his build. The arena is a circular stone pit with tiered seating and wards shimmering along the perimeter to contain stray spells. When Jae-won walks into the pit for his first match, the crowd barely pays attention. A masked nobody versus a mid-tier braggart isn't exactly the main event, and people are still settling into their seats. Hyunjun Seo struts in from the opposite gate with flames already licking up his forearms. He's got the swagger of a guy who's never been humbled, and he looks at Jae-won's cloak like it's a joke he doesn't get yet. The referee signals the start, and Hyun launches a fireball the size of a watermelon straight at Jae-won's chest. Jae-won doesn't dodge, and the fireball hits him square. The crowd gasps, and then goes quiet as the flames dissipate against the cloak without leaving a mark. Turns out the maintenance boiler suits are fireproof up to B-tier temperatures, and nobody ever bothered to mention that to the combat students. Hyun's confidence cracks down the middle, and he throws 3 more fireballs in rapid sequence. Jae-won walks through them like he's strolling through a warm breeze, and the crowd starts paying attention now. He closes the distance in 6 strides, and Hyun panics, backpedaling and fumbling for a defensive spell. Jae-won pulls the pistol from under his cloak and doesn't fire, just brings the butt down on Hyun's temple. Fire Mage drops like a sack of stones, and the referee calls the match. First round over in 40 seconds, and the crowd doesn't know whether to cheer or demand an investigation. Jae-won is already walking out of the pit before the medics reach Hyun's body. Word spreads fast through the tournament grounds, and by the time his second match starts, the stands are half full. This one is against a wind mage named Baek Ji-ho, who's B-tier and fast. Really fast. The kind of fighter who wins by keeping distance. The referee drops his hand, and Baek immediately launches himself into the air with a cyclone boost. He rains wind blades down from 20 feet up, and Jae-won has to actually move now. The blades slice through the stone floor where he was standing a second ago, and the crowd roars at the near miss. Jae-won tracks Baek's movement pattern and realizes the guy always pauses for half a second at the apex of each cyclone jump. That's the window, and he only needs one hand free to use it. Baek launches another jump, and at the apex, Jae-won draws the pistol and fires a single shot past Baek's ear. The bullet doesn't hit him, but the crack of displaced air and the sheer wrongness of the sound makes Baek flinch. He loses concentration and tumbles out of his cyclone, hitting the stone floor hard enough to knock the wind out of him. Jae-won is on him before he can breathe again, and the pistol butt comes down on the back of his skull. Second match over in under 2 minutes, and Jae-won feels a familiar spike of pain driving through his chest. He touches his temple as he walks out, and finds another white strand joining the 3 already there. 5 years gone now, and his left knee is definitely getting worse. But he's still standing and still moving. He makes it back to the tunnels before the pain doubles him over. His heart is doing that skipping thing again. A stutter that feels like someone's flicking a switch in his chest. He counts his ammunition by touch in the dark, and the number 9 burns in his mind like a brand. 9 bullets left and 9 years of his life if he pulls the trigger on all of them. He sleeps for 6 hours on the damp tunnel floor, and wakes up feeling like he's been hit by a car. The semifinal bracket posts the next morning, and Jae-won reads his opponent's name with a cold twist in his gut. Kwon Do-yoon. Council's golden boy has been carving through his own bracket like a scythe through wheat, and he hasn't even broken a sweat yet. Jae-won knows Kwon's fighting style by reputation. A-tier fire magic with a secondary in barrier arts. Disciplined and precise and utterly merciless. This isn't going to be a repeat of the first 2 matches, and Jae-won's got no illusions about walking through Kwon's flames. The arena is packed to capacity when Jae-won walks out for the semifinal. Kwon is already standing in the center of the pit with his arms crossed and his council badge gleaming on his chest. His aura is visible even without a scanner. A shimmer of heat haze that warps the air around him in a 10-foot radius. Referee signals the start, and neither of them moves for a full 3 seconds. Kwon tilts his head, and something flickers in his expression. Recognition clicking into place behind his eyes. He's figured it out, and Jae-won can see it in the way Kwon's stance shifts from casual to coil. Kwon speaks loud enough for the nearest spectators to hear, and says he knows that posture, that weight distribution, that way of holding a weapon. He says the mask isn't hiding anything from someone who's already seen the real thing. Jae-won doesn't answer and draws the pistol from under his cloak. The crowd murmurs at the sight of the weapon, confused and curious, and a little bit frightened because guns don't exist in this world. Kwon's eyes narrow, and he raises both hands, summoning a layered barrier of compressed fire and reinforced air. 3 concentric shields snap into place around him, and the heat from the outermost one scorches the stone floor in a 20-foot circle. Kwon says he's been wondering what that weapon does to people, and now he gets to find out firsthand. He attacks before Jae-won can line up a shot, launching a spear of condensed flame that moves faster than anything Jae-won has dodged before. The spear grazes his shoulder, and the cloak catches fire instantly. Jae-won rips the burning cloak off and throws it aside, exposing the welding mask and the worn academy uniform underneath. The crowd doesn't recognize him yet, but Kwon does, and his smile goes sharp at the edges. Jae-won raises the pistol and fires his first shot straight through the outer barrier. The bullet hits the fire shield, and the shield doesn't just crack, it disintegrates, the flames snuffing out like a candle dropped in water. Kwon's eyes go wide, and he reinforces the second barrier with both hands, pouring everything he's got into it. Jae-won fires again, and the second barrier shatters in a spray of blue sparks. The recoil is worse now, a deep ache spreading from his wrist to his shoulder, like someone's driving nails into the bone. His heart stutters twice in a row, and he tastes copper at the back of his throat. 7 years gone, and he can feel every single one of them pressing down on his spine. Kwon is retreating now, his confidence gone, throwing up the third barrier with desperation instead of discipline. Jae-won lines up the third shot, and Kwon does something Jae-won doesn't expect. He drops the barrier himself and raises both hands in surrender. The crowd goes dead silent, and Kwon says he yields, loud enough for the referee to hear and for every spectator in the stands to record in their memory. Jae-won keeps the pistol trained on Kwon's chest for 3 heartbeats and then lowers it. The referee calls the match, and Jae-won walks out of the pit without looking back. His hood is gone and his mask is cracked, but nobody in the stands is close enough to recognize the aging face underneath. Not yet, at least. He makes it to the competitor's tunnel and collapses against the wall with his heart hammering so hard he can see his vision pulsing. 10 years older than he was a week ago, and the mirror in the tunnel's equipment locker shows him a stranger. His hair is streaked with silver now, not just at the temples but through the whole front, and the lines around his mouth are deep enough to hold shadow. He's got 9 bullets left, and he's about to face a professor in the final match. Final is the next day, and the arena is so packed that students are sitting in the aisles and standing on the upper walkway. Jae-won walks out in a fresh cloak, pulled from the maintenance stores, and the crowd roars at the sight of the mystery fighter who took down Kwon. Do-yoon. His opponent is Professor Nam Gyu-jin, head of the Combat Magic Department, and an A-tier mage with 40 years of dueling experience. Nam doesn't look impressed by the masked fighter or the strange weapon hanging at Jae-won's hip. He's a thin man with cold eyes and a dueling scar running from his left ear to his jaw, and his aura crackles with barely contained lightning magic. The referee signals the start, and Nam attacks instantly. No warm-up and no testing. Just a barrage of lightning bolts that turn the pit into a kill zone. Jae-won dives behind a stone pillar and feels the impact of a bolt shattering the stone a foot from his head. Nam's voice carries over the thunder, and he says he's seen the footage of the previous matches. He knows the weapon can break shields, and he's not going to give Jae-won a stationary target. The professor moves like a striking snake, never staying in one place for more than half a second, and his lightning bolts keep Jae-won pinned. Jae-won can't get a clear shot, and he's running out of cover. He vaults over a fallen pillar and takes a lightning bolt to the left shoulder that sends him spinning into the arena wall. The pain is immense, and his left arm goes numb from the elbow down. Nam advances with a blade of condensed electricity forming in his right hand and tells Jae-won to surrender before this gets embarrassing. Jae-won's got one move left, and it's the one he swore he'd save for the headmaster. He overcharges the pistol, feeling the mechanism shudder and heat in his grip as the weapon draws on something deeper than normal ammunition. The life drain accelerates 5-fold, and Jae-won's vision goes white at the edges as years start peeling off him in chunks. Nam sees the glow building in the pistol's barrel, and his confident smirk drops away. He throws up the strongest barrier he's got, a dome of solid lightning that's dense enough to crack the stone floor beneath it. Jae-won fires the overcharged shot, and the sound is wrong. A low thrum that vibrates through everyone's bones instead of a sharp crack. The bullet hits Nam's barrier, and the barrier doesn't just break. It vaporizes in a flash of white light that blinds half the audience. The shockwave throws Nam across the pit, and he hits the far wall hard enough to crater the stone. He doesn't get up, and the referee rushes to check his pulse. The crowd is screaming, but Jae-won can barely hear them over the roaring in his ears. He's on his knees, and he doesn't remember falling. His hair is almost entirely white now, and his hands are the hands of a 50-year-old man, knobby and veined and trembling. The hood falls back, and the cracked welding mask slips off his face. The gasps start in the front row and ripple backward through the stands like a wave. Students who saw Jae-won in the cafeteria last week are staring at a man who looks 30 years older. Kwon is standing at the edge of the competitor's box, and his face is unreadable. But there's something almost like respect in the way he holds his gaze. The referee announces Black Trigger as the winner of the Celestia Combat Tournament. Jae-won tries to stand, and his legs don't cooperate. So he stays on his knees and just breathes through the pain. His heart is skipping every third beat now, and the joint damage has spread to his right hip and both ankles. Every year he spent is carved into his body, and there's no potion or spell that can put them back. Two enforcers appear at the pit's edge, and Jae-won's hand finds the pistol grip by instinct. But they're not here to arrest him because the tournament winner has immunity from Academy prosecution for the duration of the award ceremony. Ancient charter rules, and nobody, not even the headmaster, can override them without losing face in front of the noble patron. One of the enforcers kneels beside him and mutters that he looks like death warmed over. Jae-won doesn't argue, and he doesn't resist when they lift him onto a stretcher and carry him toward the infirmary. His fingers are locked around the tournament key they pressed into his palm during the stretcher ride, a heavy iron thing etched with runes that match the record vault's seal. He's got the key, and he's got 9 bullets, and he's got a name and a direction. The infirmary ceiling scrolls past in white panels, and Jae-won closes his eyes. Not because he's sleeping, but because he's counting the days he has left and measuring them against the distance to the headmaster's throat. He wakes to the smell of antiseptic and old blood. His body feels like a sack of broken glass. Shim Byung-taek sits in a plastic chair beside the bed, hands folded over his cane, watching Jae-won with the expression of a man who's seen this exact thing before. He doesn't bother with pleasantries. He tells Jae-won the soul link is permanent, and the years he burned won't come back. The pistol doesn't just age the user in some cosmetic way, it consumes the actual substance of a soul. Shim explains that every bullet fired rips out a segment of the shooter's life force and transfers it into the weapon. That energy is what gives the bullets their shield-breaking punch. Normal magic can't touch the projectiles because normal magic doesn't operate on soul weight. Jae-won asks how Shim knows all this. The old librarian pulls back his own sleeve, and the skin on his forearm is a roadmap of pale, raised scars running from wrist to elbow. He says he was the assistant researcher on the original Gate project 22 years ago. Shim helped build the first prototype of the pistol. He watched the headmaster test it on 3 unwilling subjects before the project was shut down. The first subject died instantly. His body turned to ash before the bullet even left the barrel, because his soul was too weak to fuel the shot. Second subject fired twice and aged 40 years in the space of a heartbeat. Then his heart simply stopped. Jae-won lies completely still on the infirmary cot and asks about the third subject. Shim doesn't answer right away. He stares at the ceiling like the words are stuck somewhere behind his teeth. And then he says, the third subject was a 14-year-old girl. She was small, quiet, and she volunteered because the headmaster told her it would save her brother's place at the academy. Her name was Yoon Mira. Jae-won's hand finds the pistol grip under the thin infirmary blanket, and his knuckles go white. Shim tells him the shot Mira fired was the only one that ever worked correct, broke through an S-tier barrier the headmaster had erected as a test. But the cost was all of her. She aged from 14 to 80 in under 3 seconds, and her body gave out before she hit the floor. The headmaster extracted her remaining soul energy and bound it into the pistol. That's why the weapon works for Jae-won. It's not keyed to his bloodline or his magical signature. It's keyed to grief. Shim says the pistol knows he's her brother, and that's why it answered him in the vault. Jae-won asks what happened to Mira's soul. Shim tells him the soul isn't gone. The bullet she fired was never recovered because it vanished through the gate portal during the test. Part of her is still on the other side. Jae-won tries to sit up, and his entire left side screams in protest, but he forces himself upright anyway. His shoulder is bandaged, and there's a cold pack strapped to his elbow, but the lightning damage runs deeper than the skin. He's been in the infirmary for 6 hours, and he's already lost more muscle mass than a normal person loses in a decade. His reflection in the metal tray beside the bed shows a man in his late 50s with hollow cheeks and thin, papery skin. The white hair isn't just at his temples anymore, it's his whole head. Shim watches him examine his own face and doesn't offer comfort. He says the aging accelerates with every shot, and the overcharge Jae-won used in the final match likely cost him 20 years in a single trigger. Full. Jae-won asks how long he has left. Shim tells him maybe a week, maybe less if he fires again. The pistol is sitting at 6 bullets, but every additional shot will carve another year off whatever remains. Jae-won doesn't flinch at the number. He's been counting days since Mira died, and the math doesn't scare him anymore. What scares him is dying before he puts a bullet through the headmaster's skull. The infirmary door opens. A nurse in crisp white scrubs enters with a syringe on a steel tray and tells Jae-won it's time for his sedative. She doesn't make eye contact, and her hands are too steady. Jae-won has spent 3 years identifying threats by the way people hold their shoulders. This woman's shoulders are a threat. He asks what's in the syringe. She says it's a standard painkiller. Shim glances at the syringe, and his face goes the color of spoiled milk. He tells Jae-won the liquid in that vial is the same compound the headmaster used to sedate test subjects before extraction. Jae-won is out of the bed before the nurse finishes her sentence. The nurse's expression doesn't change. She simply pulls a small rune-inscribed dagger from her sleeve and lunges at him with the speed of someone who's done this before. Jae-won's left arm is useless, so he catches the blade with his right hand, and the dagger slices through his palm clean to the bone. Blood sprays across the infirmary floor, and the nurse is already twisting the blade for a second thrust. He headbutts her. She staggers back 2 steps, and the syringe clatters to the floor and rolls under the bed. Shim swings his cane at her knees and she goes down hard. The sound her skull makes hitting the tile is wet and final, and she doesn't move again. 2 guards burst through the infirmary door with drawn wands, and their uniform patches mark them as headmaster's personal detail. Jae-won doesn't have time for a clean fight. He doesn't have energy for a clean fight. His hand closes around the pistol, and the grip is slick with his own blood. But the weapon hums against his palm, and he knows it wants to fire. The first guard raises his wand, and a bolt of orange energy crackles at the tip. Jae-won pulls the trigger. The bullet hits the guard's center mass and tears through his chest like tissue paper, and he's dead before his wand hits the floor. Jae-won feels the drain immediately. His spine bows and his teeth grind together, and somewhere deep in his marrow, another year is ripped out of him. Second guard hesitates for half a second, and that's the half second Jae-won needs. He fires again. The bullet punches through the guard's hastily raised barrier and takes him high in the shoulder, and he spins into the doorframe and crumples. He's still breathing, but he won't be casting anything for a while. Jae-won sways on his feet, and his vision tunnels to a pinprick, and he has to brace himself against the wall to avoid collapsing. Shim grabs his arm and tells him to move. The infirmary alarm starts shrieking, and the sound bounces off every surface until it's impossible to tell which direction it's coming from. Jae-won looks at his reflection one more time in the metal tray. He is 60 years old now. His face is a landscape of new wrinkles, and his hands are speckled with liver spots, and the tremor in his right wrist is constant and visible. He has 4 bullets left. Maybe a week to live. He grabs his cloak and the tournament key, and he limps out of the infirmary with Shim half carrying him. The record vault is in the administrative wing on the opposite side of the academy. Getting there means crossing the main courtyard and 3 floors of guarded hallways. Shim tells him there's a service passage that runs under the east wing. Jae-won follows him into the maintenance stairwell, and every step is a negotiation with his own skeleton. His knee grinds audibly, and the joint damage that started in his left side has spread to both hips now. He can feel the friction every time he shifts his weight. The service passage is narrow and dark, and it smells like rust and old machine oil. Move in silence for 10 minutes. Jae-won's breathing is ragged and shallow, and he keeps his good hand pressed against the wall to steady himself. Shim stops at an unmarked steel door and produces a keycard from his coat. The lock beeps green, and the door swings open onto a corridor lined with marble busts of former headmasters. The record vault is at the end of this corridor. Jae-won limps past busts of old men with carved frowns, and he doesn't look at any of them. The vault door is 12 feet of enchanted iron, with runic seals that glow faintly blue in the dim light. Jae-won presses the tournament key against the central seal. The runes pulse once, and then go dark, and the door swings inward without a sound. Inside the vault is a single room lined with filing cabinets and shelves packed with leather-bound ledgers. Every document the council has sealed in the last 50 years is stored in this room. Jae-won doesn't care about 50 years. He cares about one name. He pulls open drawer after drawer with his bleeding right hand, and the paper edges slice his fingers open in a dozen small cuts, but he doesn't stop. Shim stands guard at the door, and his face is tight with something between hope and dread. Jae-won finds the binder in the 3rd cabinet from the left. It's thick and heavy, and the cover is stamped with 2 words: Project Exodus. He opens it on the floor because his legs won't hold him upright anymore. The first page is a personnel roster. 3rd name from the top: Yoon Mi-ra. Age 14. Status: deceased. Cause: soul extraction phase 3 testing. Jae-won turns the page. There are photographs. His sister is strapped to a metal table surrounded by arcane machinery with tubes and wires running into her arms and throat and temples. She's conscious in every photo, and her eyes are looking directly at the camera. She's not afraid. She looks furious, the kind of fury that doesn't burn hot. It burns cold and steady and patient. Jae-won stares at the photos until his vision blurs, and then he keeps staring. He flips deeper into the binder and finds the equipment logs. The pistol is blueprint number 7. Labeled as a soul-anchored life drainer, the notes in the margin are written in the headmaster's handwriting. They detail the pairing mechanism and the soul bond requirements and the projected combat applications. The pistol was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a bridge. The headmaster planned to use it to fire a soul-anchored round through the gate and establish a permanent tether between the two worlds. Once the tether was stable, he could open the gate fully without it collapsing. Mira's soul was the anchor. The bullet she fired is still on the other side. Jae-won keeps turning pages, and his hands are shaking so badly he can barely read the text. The final section of the binder contains a map. It shows the gate's projected exit point on the other world, a location marked with a single word: sanctuary. Jae-won doesn't know what sanctuary is, but he knows the headmaster wants it badly enough to kill dozens of students for it. He closes the binder and tucks it inside his cloak. His heart is skipping every 4th beat now, and the pain in his chest has gone from sharp to something duller and more permanent. Jim asks him what he found. Jae-won tells him everything, and the old librarian closes his eyes and doesn't speak for a long moment. Then the intercom crackles. The voice that comes through is smooth and calm and completely unhurried. It's the headmaster. He says he knew Jae-won would find his way to the vault eventually. He says it's almost admirable how far a magicless rat can crawl on spite alone. He tells the entire academy to listen closely. Jae-won is to be brought to the headmaster's office alive. The reward for his capture is a full council scholarship and guaranteed placement in the elite combat division. The reward for his corpse is expulsion and a permanent black mark. The intercom clicks off. Shim looks at Jae-won. Jae-won looks at the vault door. The corridor outside is already filling with footsteps. Jae-won pockets the binder and checks the pistol's chamber. 4 bullets. 6 days of life left if he's lucky. The headmaster just announced to the entire academy that Jae-won is both a terrorist and a payday. He's cornered and broken and outnumbered, and every student who ever hated him now has permission to hunt him. He limps to the vault door and peers through the crack. 4 enforcers are coming down the corridor with wands drawn, and their faces are blank and professional. Jae-won eases the door shut and turns to Shim. He asks if there's another way out. Shim points at a ventilation grate in the ceiling. It's small and rusted, and the drop behind it is 30 feet into the maintenance basement. Jae-won pulls himself up with one working arm, and his body screams, and the pistol clanks against the metal. And he doesn't stop. He doesn't look back. He drops into the dark and lands on concrete, and the impact splinters something in his ankle. The pain is immediate and blinding. He doesn't scream because screaming is a luxury for people who aren't being hunted. He drags himself upright and feels the weight of the binder against his ribs and the weight of the pistol against his hip. He has the truth now. He has the names and the photos and the blueprints. He has 4 bullets and a shattered ankle and the entire academy between him and the headmaster, and he has nothing left to lose. The maintenance basement stretches ahead of him in a maze of pipes and shadows. Somewhere above him, the enforcers are tearing the vault apart. He starts limping deeper into the dark, and every step is a negotiation with a body that wants to quit. The binder presses against his chest, and he can feel his sister's eyes through the photographs, cold and steady and patient. Just like him. Jae-won keeps the pistol pointed at Kwon's chest, and he does not lower it. His hand is shaking, but his aim is steady. Kwon's hands are empty and raised, and his face is not the face of a man who is setting a trap. His jaw is tight, and his eyes are wet, and he looks like someone who has been carrying a secret so long it has warped his spine. He tells Jae-won he is not here to fight. Jae-won asks why he dropped the weapon then. Kwon says because he has been waiting 3 years for someone to point a gun at the headmaster, and he is not going to stop the one person who finally has one. The corridor behind them is empty, but the intercom is still crackling with static. And somewhere above them, the enforcers are tearing apart the vault, looking for a man who is already gone. Jae-won does not move, and he does not blink. He asks Kwon what he knows about the gate project. Kwon looks at the binder tucked inside Jae-won's ruined cloak, and he says he knows his father died for it. The answer hits Jae-won like a physical blow, and the pistol wavers for half a second. Kwon says his father was a senior researcher on Project Exodus 22 years ago. He was the one who designed the stabilization array for the gate portal, and he was the one who realized the headmaster was not trying to close the gate. The headmaster was trying to open it permanently. When his father threatened to go to the council, the headmaster had him executed, and the official report listed the cause of death as a laboratory accident. Kwon was 6 years old when they handed him the ashes in a sealed urn. Jae-won lowers the pistol by an inch, and his heart skips and stutters and he forces himself to stay upright. He asks how he knows the story is true.
Kwon reaches into his jacket,
And Jae-won tenses, but what comes out is not a weapon. It is a photograph, old and creased and worn soft at the edges from being held too many times.
The photo shows 3 men in white laboratory coats standing in front of a massive stone archway, carved with runes that match the ones on the pistol's barrel. The man on the left is 20 years younger,
And his face is sharper and his eyes are kinder. And it is still unmistakably Headmaster Ma Jun-hyuk.
the man in the center is a younger Shim Byung-taek,
With both his legs still working and a smile that has not yet been broken.
The man on the right is Kwon's father,
And Kwon has his jaw and his cheekbones, and the same way of standing like he is bracing for a blow.
Jae-won stares at the photo,
And the pieces snap together with a cold and terrible clarity. He asks Kwon if he knew about his sister.
Kwon says he did not know her name,
But he knew there was a 4th test subject after the first 3 died. And he knew the headmaster considered her.
the key to everything.
Jae-won's finger tightens on the trigger, and then he forces it loose again.
He tells Kwon her name was Yoon Mi-ra.
And she was 14. And she was braver than anyone he has ever known.
Kwon closes his eyes,
And when he opens them again, there is something new in his expression.
something that looks like the beginning of an apology
Or the end of a prayer. He says he cannot give her back, but he can give Jae-won something else.
Jae-won asks what.
Kwon says he can give him the headmaster's laboratory.
The word hangs in the air,
And Jae-won feels the weight of the binder against his ribs, and the weight of the pistol in his hand, and the weight of 4 bullets in 6 days, and a sister who is still waiting on the other side of a gate she never chose to open. He asks Kwon how he plans to get them inside. Kwon says the council conducts routine inspections of all research facilities every semester, and he is the inspection officer for the East Wing, where
the headmaster's private lab is located.
he has a scheduled inspection in 2 days, and he has the authority to bring 1 assistant. Jae-won asks why he should trust him.
Kwon looks at the photograph in his hand,
And then he looks at Jae-won, and he says he has spent 16 years pretending to be loyal to the man who murdered his father so he could stand in this hallway and make this offer.
He says trust is a luxury neither of them can afford.
But revenge is something they both understand. Jae-won does not answer for a long moment.
His ankle is screaming,
And his shoulder is a dead weight, and his heart is beating in a rhythm that feels like a countdown.
he thinks about the headmaster's voice on the intercom.
Smooth and calm, and completely unhurried like a man who has already won.
He thinks about his sister's eyes in the photographs.
Furious and patient, and waiting for someone to finish what she started. He holsters the pistol.
Kwon exhales,
And his shoulders drop. And for the first time, he looks like a 19-year-old kid instead of an elite combat mage.
he reaches into his coat again.
And this time, he pulls out a small glass vial filled with a liquid that glows faintly gold.
He says it is a restorative potion,
And it will not fix the damage from the soul drain, but it will stabilize his body long enough to make it through
the next 2 days.
Jae-won takes the vial and his fingers are stiff and swollen, and he nearly drops it. He asks what the catch is.
Kwon says the catch is that if Jae-won dies before they reach the lab,
Then 16 years of waiting are wasted, and he is not about to let a magicless
cripple die in a basement before he can point a gun at the right target.
Jae-won almost laughs.
It is a dry and hollow sound
that scrapes against his throat, and then he uncorks the vial and drinks the contents in 1 swallow.
The liquid burns going down,
And then the burn spreads through his chest and into his limbs. And for a moment, he can feel his heartbeat steady into
something that is not quite normal.
but is at least not actively trying to kill him.
The tremors in his hands ease,
And the gray at the edges of his vision recedes, and he takes a breath that does not feel like a knife between his ribs.
Kwon pulls a folded sheet of paper from his pocket.
He unfolds it on the concrete floor, and Jae-won sees that it is a blueprint.
Detailed schematic of the headmaster's laboratory with every room and corridor and ventilation shaft marked in precise black ink. In the center of the blueprint, there is a large circular chamber labeled Power Core.
Kwon taps the chamber with his finger.
He says the power core is what keeps the gate stable.
And if they destroy it, the gate collapses, and every piece of the headmaster's research goes with
it.
Jae-won studies the blueprint, and his mind is already mapping routes and choke points, and places where a man with 4 bullets can do the most damage.
He asks how heavily guarded the core room is.
Kwon says there are 4 rotating guards and a barrier ward that requires council authorization to bypass, and that is why they are not going in guns
Blazing.
They are going to walk through the front door with clipboards and inspection badges, and the full authority of the council behind them.
Jae-won asks what happens when they reach the core room
And the guards realize they are not there for an inspection.
Kwon meets his eyes,
And his expression is cold and flat and completely unreadable. He says that is when Jae-won uses the pistol.
The plan is simple and reckless, and hinges on a dozen things that could go wrong in 100 different ways.
Jae-won has survived this long by trusting no one, and the idea of walking into the headmaster's stronghold with a man he has known only as an enemy
Feels like a special kind of madness.
but he is out of options and out of time. And Kwon is offering him a path to the man who killed his sister.
He nods.
Kwon folds the blueprint and hands it to Jae-won and tells him to memorize every inch of it before the inspection. They agree to meet at the East Wing service entrance in 2 days at dawn, and Kwon turns to leave. Jae-won stops him with a question.
He asks why Kwon did not just kill him and take the pistol for himself.
Kwon pauses at the bottom of the stairwell, and he does not turn around. He says the pistol is keyed to grief, and his grief is not the kind the weapon recognizes. Then he is gone, and Jae-won is alone in the dark with the blueprint, and the binder, and the pistol, and a borrowed heartbeat that is ticking down to 0. He limps deeper into the maintenance basement and finds a corner behind a stack of rusted pipes where the shadows are thick enough to hide a dying man. He props himself against the wall and unfolds the blueprint and studies it under the faint glow of a single flickering service light. The laboratory is a maze, but he has spent 3 years navigating a school that wanted him dead, and a maze is just another kind of battlefield. He traces the route from the service entrance to the power core, and he counts the ventilation shafts and the maintenance hatches and the emergency exits. He finds a small vent that runs directly above the core chamber, and he memorizes its location and the number of turns it takes to reach it. Then he takes the pistol from his hip, and he examines it in the dim light. 4 bullets, 4 years of his life gone, and 6 days left if he is lucky, and every shot that remains is a promise he intends to keep. But the plan with Kwon requires him to walk through the front door, and he cannot do that with a weapon that screams his identity to every guard they pass. He needs to hide the pistol somewhere the headmaster's people will not find it. He looks up at the ventilation shaft above his head, and he makes a decision. He drags a rusted crate beneath the vent, and he climbs onto it with 1 working leg and 1 working arm, and the pain is a white-hot spike that does not stop. He pries open the vent cover, and he slides the pistol inside, and he wraps it in a strip torn from his ruined cloak so the metal will not scrape against the shaft. The pistol disappears into the dark, and Jae-won feels the absence of its weight like a missing limb. He climbs down and shoves the crate back into place, and he memorizes the vent's location and the pattern of rust on the wall beside it. Kwon does not know the pistol is empty. Jae-won is not sure what that will mean when they reach the core room, and the guards close in, and Kwon looks at him, expecting a shot that will never come. Maybe Kwon will betray him before that. Maybe he is walking into a trap, and the headmaster is already waiting, and the 2-day delay is just a chance to prepare a cell with his name on it. But the binder is real, and the photograph is real, and Kwon's grief is real. Jae-won can see it in the way he held the picture, and the way his voice cracked when he said his father's name. Man can fake a lot of things, but 16 years of mourning is not one of them. He tucks the blueprint into the binder, and he presses the binder against his chest, and he feels his sister's eyes through the photographs. He closes his eyes, and he tries to sleep, and the potion is wearing off, and his heart is starting to skip again. 2 days. He has 2 days to heal enough to stand and walk and hold a weapon that is no longer in his hands. He has no plan for what happens when Kwon realizes the pistol is empty. He has no plan for what happens if the headmaster is waiting. He has no plan for a lot of things. He has a blueprint, and a binder, and a borrowed heartbeat, and a sister who is still on the other side of a gate that should never have been opened. And for the first time in 3 years, he has someone who wants the headmaster dead as badly as he does. Even if that someone is an enemy. Even if that someone is a trap. Even if the trap is already closing. He sleeps in the dark behind the pipes, and his dreams are full of photographs and ashes, and a girl with furious eyes who is still waiting for someone to bring her home. The first thing Jae-won does when he wakes is check the vent. The pistol is still there, wrapped in the torn strip of cloak, and he pulls it out and checks the chamber and counts 4 bullets. 4 bullets he already knew about. He slides the pistol back into the vent, and he covers it with the cloak scrap, and he memorizes the location again, like a prayer. His body is worse than it was before he slept. Potion Kwon gave him has worn off completely, and his heart is skipping every 3rd beat now, and the pain in his chest has spread to his jaw, and his left arm is completely useless. He looks at his reflection in a puddle of stagnant water, and he sees a man who is 60 years old and dying, and has maybe 4 days left instead of 6. He does not have 2 days to wait for Kwon's inspection. He has maybe 1.5. He spends the first day hiding in the basement and memorizing the blueprint and doing small exercises to keep his right arm functional. He flexes his fingers and he practices drawing a phantom weapon,
and he ignores the way his body screams every time he moves. He does not eat because he cannot stomach food. He drinks from a dripping pipe, and the water tastes like rust, and he does not care. By nightfall, the tremors are back and his vision is blurring at the edges, and he knows he is running out of time faster than he planned. He pulls the pistol from the vent, and he holds it in his lap, and he traces the runes on the barrel with his thumb. The pistol is warm against his skin, and the warmth feels like a heartbeat, and he knows it is not the pistol that is warm. It is the soul energy inside it. His sister's soul. Still waiting, he puts the pistol back in the vent, and he closes his eyes, and he breathes through the pain. The second day arrives, and Jae-won drags himself upright, and he checks the vent one final time. The pistol is where he left it, and the 4 bullets are still in the chamber, and he wraps it in the cloak scrap, and he pushes it deeper into the shaft. He will not be carrying it when he meets Kwon. He will be carrying a different kind of weapon. He limps to the East Wing service entrance, and every step is a negotiation with a body that wants to quit. He arrives at dawn, and Kwon is already waiting. Kwon is wearing a council inspection uniform, and he has 2 clipboards and 2 badges and a face that is carefully blank. He looks at Jae-won, and he sees the worsening damage, and he does not comment on it. He just hands him a badge and a clipboard and tells him to stay quiet and follow his lead. Jae-won clips the badge to his ruined cloak, and he takes the clipboard. And he does not tell Kwon that the pistol is 60 feet away in a vent shaft, and he has no way to reach it. He does not tell Kwon that the plan has already changed. He just nods and he follows, and he steps through the service entrance into the belly of the beast. The laboratory is bright and sterile and cold, and the guards at the first checkpoint barely glance at their badges. Kwon is a known inspector, and Jae-won is a nameless assistant, and no one looks twice at a dying old man with a clipboard. They walk past research stations and containment cells, and rooms full of arcane machinery that hums with a frequency that makes Jae-won's teeth ache. Every door they pass is heavy iron, and every corridor is lined with runic wards that pulse faint blue in the fluorescent light. Kwon leads him deeper and deeper, and the blueprint in Jae-won's mind maps their route in real time. Left at the 3rd junction, right at the containment wing, straight past the extraction chambers. The extraction chambers. Jae-won looks through the observation windows as they pass, and he sees metal tables and leather straps and machines with tubes and wires and the same arcane symbols that were in the photographs of his sister. He stops walking. Kwon grabs his arm and pulls him forward and tells him to keep moving. Jae-won moves. His clipboard is shaking in his hand, and he forces his grip to steady. They reach the power core chamber, and the door is 12 feet of enchanted iron, with a barrier ward that hums loud enough to feel through the floor. The door swings open, and the power core chamber swallows them whole. Massive conduits run floor to ceiling like copper veins pumping liquid mana through the entire facility. And in the center sits the core itself, a sphere of compressed arcane energy the size of a small car, rotating inside a ring of black iron. It hums at a frequency that makes Jae-won's teeth vibrate, and his bad heart stutter. Our boy scans the room and counts 4 guards at the perimeter, and 2 technicians at the control panel, and 1 observation platform 20 feet up. Kwon is already walking toward the control console with his clipboard in hand and his face unreadable. Jae-won limps behind him, and every step sends a knife through his shattered ankle, and his left arm hangs dead at his side, and his vision has started to blur at the edges again. He's running on fumes and rage, and one last thread of hope, that Kwon Do-yoon is who he said he is. Technicians barely look up from their instruments. One of them asks if the inspection is scheduled, and Kwon says it's a surprise audit from the Council Ethics Committee. The technician reaches for a communication crystal, and Kwon puts his hand over the man's wrist and says that won't be necessary. And then everything happens at once. Kwon's free hand comes up and slams a runic disc onto the console, and the entire floor of the chamber lights up with concentric rings of blue-white energy. Jae-won knows what it is before his brain even finishes processing the sight. A containment field. He's standing in the center of it. The guards are outside the rings, and the technicians are scrambling backward. And Kwon Do-yoon is stepping through the outermost ring just before it. Seals shut. He turns around, and he looks at Jae-won through the shimmering barrier, and his eyes are flat and empty. Our boy doesn't waste breath asking why. He already knows. The headmaster offered a better deal, and 16 years of pretending to be loyal wasn't pretending at all. Kwon's voice comes through the barrier muffled and tinny. He says he's sorry. He says his father really did die in that lab, and he really did hate the headmaster for it. But then the headmaster showed him what the gate could really do. He says the gate doesn't just open to another world. It opens to a world where the dead can come back. Jae-won's hand twitches toward his waist, and he finds nothing there but torn cloak, and the binder of photographs pressed against his ribs. Kwon says the headmaster promised to resurrect his father if he delivered the soul-anchored weapon and its current host. He says Jae-won should have taken the deal when it was offered. And then Kwon pulls a lever on the far side of the console, and 3 heavy iron doors grind open on the chamber's north wall. 3 cells and 3 shapes moving inside them. The first thing that steps out walks on 4 legs, but it used to be human. Its spine is bent at an angle that shouldn't be possible, and its arms have been replaced with chitinous blades that drip something black and viscous. The second creature floats 6 inches off the ground, and its body is a mass of translucent flesh, with too many eyes and a mouth that opens vertically instead of horizontally. The third one is wearing the remnants of a student uniform. A girl with gray skin and hollow sockets where her eyes should be, and her mouth is sewn shut with silver wire. But she's still breathing, still aware. Jae-won recognizes the uniform insignia on her collar. She was a second year in the healing track, and she disappeared 6 months ago, and everyone said she dropped out. Nobody looked for her. The floating creature's mouth opens, and a sound comes out that isn't a scream, but something older and worse. The 4-legged thing charges first, and Jae-won throws himself sideways, and his bad ankle screams, and he hits the floor hard. The blade arm swipes through the air where his head was a half second ago. He rolls and comes up gasping, and the floating thing is already turning its many eyes toward him. He needs a weapon, and he needs it now, and he has nothing but his ruined body and a binder full of photographs. He scans the chamber's ceiling and floor and finds what he's looking for: maintenance conduits. The chamber runs on liquid mana, and liquid mana needs coolant, and coolant means pipes, and pipes mean gas feeds. The 4-legged thing charges again, and Jae-won limps left instead of right, and the creature overcorrects and slams shoulder first into a copper conduit as thick as his thigh. The conduit buckles, and a high-pressure jet of blue-green gas screams into the chamber. Jae-won rips a strip of cloth from his cloak and wraps it around his hand, and he grabs a loose pipe bracket off the floor. The floating creature drifts toward him, and its vertical mouth is opening and closing, and its eyes are all focused on his chest where his heart is, skipping every third beat. He doesn't aim for the creature. He aims for the gas jet. The pipe bracket leaves his hand and spins through the air and hits the ruptured conduit with a shower of sparks. The gas ignites. The explosion punches through the chamber like a god's fist, and the floating creature's body vaporizes instantly, and the 4-legged thing catches. The blast full in the face, and its chitinous arms shatter into black shrapnel, and its torso slams against the far wall and doesn't get up. The third creature doesn't move. The girl with the sewn-shut mouth stands perfectly still at the edge of the blast zone, and the fire washes over her, and she doesn't burn. She doesn't even flinch. Jae-won is already dragging himself toward the collapsed section of the ceiling. The blast tore a hole through the upper wall where a ventilation shaft used to be. Reinforced wards crackle and fail as the structural integrity gives way. His ears are ringing, and his good hand is bleeding, and his heart is doing something that feels like a fish flopping in his chest. But he's moving, and that's all that matters. Kwon is shouting something from behind the containment field, but the barrier is flickering now, and the explosion disrupted the runic array, and Jae-won doesn't wait to see if it fails completely. He reaches the broken vent, and he pulls himself up with one working arm, and his ankle grinds bone on bone, and he doesn't stop. He crawls into the shaft, and the darkness swallows him. The shaft is narrow and cold, and it slopes upward at a steep angle. Water drips somewhere ahead, and the metal is slick with condensation, and Jae-won's bad hand keeps slipping on the smooth surface. He doesn't know where this shaft leads, but he knows it goes up, and up is away from the core chamber, and that's enough for now. Behind him, he hears the containment field collapse with a sound like breaking glass, and he hears Kwon's voice shouting orders and the pounding of armored boots. He pulls himself forward faster, and his chest is burning, and his jaw is locked tight against the pain. He passes a junction, and he takes the left fork because the right fork slopes down, and he will not go back down. He crawls until his arm gives out, and then he keeps crawling because he hasn't died yet, and he refused to die in that chamber. The shaft ends at a grate, and he kicks it open with his good leg, and he tumbles out onto a cold tile floor. He's in a storage room, shelves of cleaning supplies and stacks of spare uniforms, and a single flickering mage light on the ceiling. And on a cluttered desk in the corner sits a leather satchel with a red wax seal and a scroll tube poking out the top. Jae-won drags himself to the desk, and he pulls the scroll tube free, and he cracks the seal and unrolls the parchment inside. It's a portal scroll, single-use and short-range, but targeted to the library basement. The library. Shim Byung-taek is in the library, or he was. Or he might be. Jae-won doesn't have time to weigh options. The sound of searching guards is getting closer, and his body is telling him he has minutes before he can't move at all. He slams his bloody palm onto the scroll's activation rune, and the world twists sideways and folds. He lands hard on the stone floor of Shim's reading room. The old man is sitting in his chair with a book open in his lap, and he looks up and his face goes pale. Shim doesn't ask what happened. He just stands up and crosses the room and kneels beside Jae-won and presses 2 fingers to his throat and counts his pulse. The old man's face tightens. He says the soul drain has accelerated faster than he predicted, and Jae-won's body is barely holding together. Jae-won tells him about the lab and the power core, and Kwan's betrayal, and the 3 creatures in the cells. He tells him about the girl with the sewn-shut mouth who didn't burn. Shim closes his eyes, and when he opens them again, he looks 20 years older. He says the girl is one of the headmaster's extraction subjects. He says the headmaster has been converting students into soul batteries, and the core isn't just powering the gate. It's storing their life force. Jae-won asks how many. Shim doesn't answer. Jae-won asks again, and his voice is a rasp that barely makes it out of his throat. Shim says at least 47 over the past 2 decades. 47 students who were reported as dropouts or accidents or suicides, and every single one of them is still in that laboratory. Jae-won's hand finds the binder still pressed against his ribs, and he pulls it out, and the pages are slick with his own blood. He opens it to the photograph of his sister, and he stares at her face. She was 19. Shim reaches into his robes, and his hand comes out holding something small and brass and heavy. A single bullet. He says he kept it as a relic from the original project, and he's been holding on to it for 22 years, waiting for a reason. He says he hoped he'd never have to use it. He drops it into Jae-won's palm, and the metal is cold and warm at the same time, and it pulses faintly against his skin like a heartbeat. Shim says the bullet is bonded to a fragment of the original gate seed, and it will hit harder than any normal round. He says it might be enough to destroy the core. He says it might be enough to end this. Jae-won closes his fist around the bullet, and his hand is shaking so badly he almost drops it. 4 bullets left. Now 5. He has 5 shots and a body that's maybe got 3 days in it, and a pistol hidden in a vent shaft, and a target that just got a whole lot bigger. He looks at Shim, and he asks the old man to help him stand. Shim grabs his arm and pulls him upright, and Jae-won's vision goes white for a second, and then it clears. He slips the bullet into his pocket, and it sits there against his thigh. Cold, heavy, waiting. He says he's going back to the lab, and he's going to put this bullet through the power core, and then he's going to find the headmaster. Shim tells him he won't survive the walk back. Jae-won says he doesn't need to survive it. He just needs to last long enough. He limps toward the door, and Shim doesn't try to stop him. The old man just watches him go, and there's something in his eyes that looks like pride or grief or both. Jae-won steps into the corridor, and the academy is in chaos, and alarms are screaming and students are running, and he's moving against the current, toward the east wing where his pistol is waiting. 1 bullet from Shim, 4 from before. 5 shots to burn through 47 stolen lives, and 1 power core, and 1 headmaster who thinks he's untouchable. Our boy has been dying for 3 days. Guess what? He's not done yet. The speaker on the wall crackles to life as Jae-won limps through the corridor. His own face appears on every screen in the academy. The broadcast calls him a terrorist who murdered 2 enforcers and attacked the headmaster's laboratory. Students freeze mid-run and stare at the monitors, and then they start looking around. They recognize the old man bleeding in the hallway. A second-year fire mage points at Jae-won and shouts that it's him. Jae-won doesn't stop moving. His shattered ankle screams, and his left arm hangs dead, and his vision doubles every few steps. 2 students step into his path with flames already curling around their fists. Jae-won looks at them, and he doesn't say a word. His right hand slides into his pocket and closes around Shim's bullet, and the thing pulses against his palm like a second heartbeat. The students see his ruined face and his bloody clothes, and the way his eyes don't blink. They step aside. Nobody wants to be the first one to test the gun that killed 2 enforcers. Jae-won pushes through the crowd, and he hears the whispers following him. A girl asks if that's really the magicless scholarship kid. Someone answers that he looks like he's 80 years old. The broadcast keeps looping, and his face is everywhere, and the headmaster's voice is calm and measured. The headmaster says the terrorist is armed and dangerous, and any student who apprehends him will receive a full council scholarship. Jae-won reaches the East Wing Junction and finds a painting of his sister on the wall. A memorial to the students lost in training accidents. Kira's face is frozen in oil paint, and she's smiling. And she's 19 forever. Jae-won stops for exactly 1 heartbeat, and then he turns left toward the service stairwell. The ventilation shaft is 3 floors up, and his body doesn't have 3 floors in it. He grabs the railing with his good hand, and he pulls himself up 1 step at a time.
His knee pops on the 6th step.
On the 12th step, his vision goes white and he almost pitches backward. Our boy catches the railing with his teeth clenched and blood drips from his cut palm onto the concrete. He keeps climbing. 3rd floor. The corridor is empty, but he can hear boots pounding on the floor below. Someone's searching the 2nd floor and they're moving fast. Jae-won finds the vent grate exactly where he left it, and he tears it off with his good hand, and he reaches inside. The pistol is still there, wrapped in torn cloak fabric, and it feels heavier than it did 4 hours ago. He unwraps it and checks the chamber, and 4 bullets sit in the cylinder exactly where he left them. He loads Shim's bullet into the 5th slot, and the pistol hums faintly against his palm. 5 shots. The broadcast speaker directly above his head crackles again, and the headmaster's voice changes tone. The headmaster says he knows Jae-won is listening, and he has a proposition. He says the gate is nearly complete, and when it opens, it will connect to a world where death doesn't exist. He says he can bring Yoon-mi-ra back. Jae-won's hand freezes on the pistol grip. The headmaster says all Jae-won has to do is walk to the main courtyard and surrender the weapon. He says he'll let Jae-won see his sister again. For 3 seconds, Jae-won doesn't breathe. Then he shoves the pistol into his waistband, and he starts moving toward the maintenance tunnels. Our boy knows a lie when he hears one. He takes the service stairs down, and he finds the sewer access hatch in the boiler room, and he drops into darkness. The ladder is rusted and slick, and his good hand slips on the 3rd rung. He lands hard on his bad ankle, and the pain is so bright he sees stars. Sewer tunnels under Celestia Academy were built 100 years ago, and nobody comes down here. It's cold and it smells like rot, and the only light comes from faint phosphorescent moss growing on the walls. Jae-won limps through ankle-deep water, and he counts his steps to stay conscious. 50 steps. 100. His heart does that thing where it skips a beat and then slams double hard to catch up. He stops to lean against the wall, and he coughs, and something wet hits his palm. He doesn't look at it. He keeps walking. Voice comes out of the dark, and it's young and scared, and it asks if he's the one from the broadcast. Jae-won pulls the pistol and aims it toward the sound. A boy steps into the faint glow of the moss, and he's maybe 16, and his uniform is torn, and his eyes are hollow. He says his name is Byun Tae-min, and he's been living down here for 6 months. He says he was a student in the healing track until his older brother got selected for a special research program. His brother never came back. Byun says the headmaster told him his brother ran away, but he didn't believe it. He says he found a box of his brother's things in an incinerator, and the bones were still warm. Jae-won lowers the pistol. He asks Byun how many others are down here. Byun says 5, and they're all kids whose brothers or sisters or friends got taken by the headmaster's people. He says they've been hiding in the old maintenance tunnels, and they've been watching, and they've been waiting. Jae-won asks what they're waiting for. Byun looks at the pistol in Jae-won's hand, and he says they've been waiting for someone who can kill the headmaster. He says they've been waiting for a weapon that actually works. He says they've been waiting for him. Byun leads Jae-won deeper into the tunnels, and they pass 3 junctions and a flooded section and a rusted gate. Behind the gate is a room that used to be a pumping station. Someone's hung canvas sheets over the pipes and set up 5 cots and a table made from an old door. 3 boys and 2 girls sit around a single mage lantern in the center of the room. They all look up when Byun and Jae-won enter. The oldest one stands up and he's got a scar running from his temple to his jaw, and his eyes are hard. He introduces himself as Shim Ha-jun, and he says he remembers Jae-won from before the broadcast, a magicless scholarship kid who everyone thought was worthless. He says the broadcast changed his mind. He asks if the pistol really kills mages. Jae-won pulls the gun from his waistband and sets it on the door table. The kids stare at it. The pistol sits there in the faint lantern light, and the runes on the barrel glow faintly, and the whole room feels heavier. Ha-jun reaches for it. Jae-won's hand closes around the grip before Ha-jun's fingers get halfway. He says the gun doesn't work for anyone else. He says it's keyed to him, and anyone else who tries to fire it gets nothing but a loud click and a bad day. Ha-jun doesn't look convinced. He asks Jae-won to prove it. Jae-won says no, and his voice is flat and tired, and doesn't invite argument. One of the girls speaks up, and her name is Ha-eun-byul, and she was a second-year artificing student. She says they don't need the gun. She says they just need the bullet. She says they've been stockpiling components for 6 months, and they can build a delivery system powerful enough to punch through the headmaster's shields. She says they just need a round that can ignore magic. Jae-won looks at her and he sees the same thing he sees in the mirror. Grief that's been burning so long it's turned into something cold and precise, and willing to do absolutely anything. He says no. Eun-byul asks why not. Jae-won says the bullet isn't just a bullet, and the gun isn't just a gun. He says every shot costs him a year of his life, And these bullets are the only thing keeping him alive long enough to finish this. He says if he gives them the bullet, he might as well hand them his corpse. Ha-jun stands up, and he's taller than Jae-won. And he's got both his arms working, and he looks like he's been fighting his whole life. He says Jae-won is being selfish. He says 5 people lost their families to the headmaster, and they've been planning and preparing and sacrificing. He says Jae-won stumbled into this 6 days ago, and now he wants to be the hero. Jae-won says he doesn't want to be the hero. He says he wants to be the last thing the headmaster sees before the gate collapses. His hand is still on the pistol. Ha-jun moves fast for a kid who's been living in a sewer. He lunges across the table and grabs Jae-won's wrist and tries to twist the gun free. 3 other kids pile on at once, and someone's elbow catches Jae-won in the ribs, and his vision flashes white. He can't fight 5 people. His left arm is useless, and his ankle won't hold weight. And his heart is doing that skipping thing again. Ha-jun's fingers close around the barrel, and he yanks hard, and Jae-won's grip slips. The pistol clatters to the floor. Eun-byul dives for it. Jae-won makes a decision that takes exactly 0 seconds. He kicks the pistol across the concrete with his good foot, and it slides under a cot and out of everyone's reach. Then he gets his hand into his pocket, and he finds Shim's bullet, and he pulls it out, and he holds it up. The room goes still. Jae-won says if anyone tries to take the pistol again, he will put this bullet through his own palm and waste it. He says the bullet that can destroy the power core and end the gate project and avenge their families. He says he'll destroy it right now, and then nobody gets revenge and nobody gets justice, and the headmaster wins. Eun-byul's eyes are wide, and her hands are shaking. She asks if he's bluffing. Jae-won doesn't answer. He just looks at her with his ruined face and his white hair and his eyes that haven't slept in 6 days. Nobody in the room thinks he's bluffing. Ha-jun slowly backs away from the cot where the pistol is hidden. He asks what Jae-won wants. Jae-won says he wants them to stop trying to take his weapon, and he wants them to understand something. He says the headmaster killed his sister and turned her soul into a bullet. He says he has 5 shots left and a body that's maybe got 2 days in it. He says he's going to put a bullet through the power core, and then he's going to find the headmaster, and then he's going to end this. He says anyone who helps him is welcome. Anyone who gets in his way gets left behind. Byun Tae-min steps forward, and he looks at Ha-jun, and then he looks at Jae-won. He says he's in. He says he's been hiding for 6 months, and he's tired of being afraid. He says he'd rather die trying than live another year in this sewer. Eun-byul nods slowly, and she says she can modify the delivery system to work with the pistol instead. She says if Jae-won can get close enough to the power core, she can rig something that doubles the bullet's impact. Ha-jun doesn't say anything for a long time. Then he walks to the far corner of the room, and he pulls a crate out from under a canvas sheet. Inside the crate are 3 glass vials filled with a glowing blue liquid. Ha-jun says they're concentrated mana destabilizers, and they spent 4 months stealing the components from the alchemy lab. He says 1 vial is enough to short out a B-tier barrier for about 30 seconds. He says they have 3. He looks at Jae-won, and his eyes are still hard, but there's something else there now. He says if Jae-won is serious about killing the headmaster, then they'll give him everything they have. But he says Jae-won has to promise them something. He has to promise he won't die before he pulls the trigger. Jae-won looks at the vials, and he looks at Ha-jun, and he looks at the 5 kids who've been living in the dark for 6 months. He says he can't promise he won't die. He says he can promise he'll make sure the headmaster goes first. Ha-jun stares at him for 3 full seconds. Then he hands Jae-won one of the vials. Our boy pockets the mana destabilizer, and it clinks against Shim's bullet, and the weight in his coat pulls at his ruined shoulder. Eun-byul spreads a map of the Academy's lower levels across the door table. She points to a service tunnel that runs directly under the power core chamber. She says the tunnel was sealed after the original gate project, but the concrete barrier is old and cracked. She says they've been chipping at it for weeks. She says it's almost through. Jae-won asks how far. Eun-byul says maybe 6 more hours of work. Jae-won says that's too long, and his body doesn't have 6 hours of standing around in it. Byun says he'll finish the breach. He says Jae-won should rest and let the potion Kwon gave him do whatever it's still doing. Jae-won doesn't want to rest, but his vision blurs and his knees buckle, and Byun catches him before he hits the floor. They lay him on one of the cots, and someone puts a blanket over him, and someone else presses a cup of lukewarm water into his hand. He drinks it, and he stares at the ceiling, and he counts the beats of his malfunctioning heart. 2, 3, skip. 2, 3, skip. The 5th beat never comes. He closes his eyes, and he sees Mira's face on the oil painting in the East Wing corridor. She's smiling, and she's 19 forever, and she's waiting for him on the other side of a gate that shouldn't exist. He opens his eyes. The lantern is still burning, and the kids are still working. And somewhere in the dark, someone is chipping at concrete with a stolen chisel. Jae-won checks the pistol and counts his bullets, and listens to the distant sound of alarms still screaming above his head. The academy wants him dead. The headmaster wants him dead. Kwon wants him dead, but our boy is still breathing, and he's still got 5 shots, and he's still got a promise to keep. He slips the pistol under the thin pillow, and he closes his eyes, and he lets his broken body sink into the cot. Tomorrow he destroys the power core. Tomorrow he finds the headmaster. Tomorrow he ends this. But tonight, he sleeps while 5 kids who lost everything stand watch in the dark. He doesn't wake up. He drifts somewhere between the cot and the cold tile, and his breath rattles, and his heart does its wrong beat rhythm. And somewhere above him, the alarms are still screaming. Then silence. And a hand on his chest and a voice he doesn't recognize. She's saying something, but the words won't resolve. She's saying, "Stay with me." She's saying, "Don't you dare die in this sewer." Then warmth spreads from her palm into his rib cage. And it doesn't fix anything, but it shoves the darkness back about 3 inches, and Jae-won opens his eyes. Lee Seo-jin is not what he expected. She's maybe 22, 23, with short cropped hair and a burn scar that crawls up the left side of her neck and disappears under her collar. Her eyes are the color of old amber, and they've seen things. She's wearing a former council member's insignia with the center gem pride. She's been down here a long time. She doesn't ask if he's okay because nobody in this story is okay. She asks if he can stand. Jae-won tries and his left leg doesn't cooperate and his right arm screams, and he gets about halfway up before the wall catches him. Lee watches him fail and her expression doesn't change. She's seen this before. She's seen a lot of people fail to stand. She says she's been tracking him since the tournament. She says she knew the moment his hood fell and that ruined old face stared out at the crowd. She says she knew because she recognized the weapon. She says she recognized it because her sister was the first test subject. Jae-won stops breathing for a second. Not the heart thing. Something worse. He asks if she means the first one who died instantly. Lee's jaw tightens, and she says her sister didn't die instantly, but everyone thinks she did. She says her sister lasted 6 minutes and 17 seconds after the bullet was fired. She says she counted. She was in the observation room, and the headmaster made her watch, and she's been counting ever since. Our boy doesn't say he's sorry. He knows better. He just looks at her, and she looks at him. And 2 people who lost everything to the same nightmare recognize each other in the dark. She drags him through a maintenance hatch he didn't know existed. It's narrow and rusted, and the edges catch on his ruined cloak, and every bump sends a spike of pain through his shattered ankle. He doesn't make a sound. Lee notices. She says most people scream. Jae-won says screaming wastes oxygen. The hatch opens into a space that shouldn't be here. It's an old custodian's apartment built into the academy's sub-basement, bricked over decades ago and forgotten by everyone except a girl with a burn scar and a grudge. The room is small, but it's clean, and there's a cot with actual sheets, and a hot plate, and a shelf of medical supplies and a corkboard on the wall, covered in photographs and red string and handwritten notes. Lee's war room. She's been planning this longer than Jae-won's been alive in this broken body. She sits him on the cot and pulls out a med kit and goes to work on his ankle. She doesn't ask permission. She just cuts the boot off and takes one look at the swelling and the purple-black bruising, and she says this is going to hurt. Then she sets the bone, and Jae-won's vision whites out for about 4 seconds. When it comes back, he's still upright, and Lee's wrapping the ankle with practiced efficiency, and she says he's lucky it's a clean break. He asks how a council member learned field medicine. Lee doesn't look up from the bandage. She says she learned it because the headmaster's extraction subjects don't always die right away. She says sometimes they linger. She says she spent 2 years in the medical ward before she figured out what was happening. And by then, 17 students were already gone. Jae-won thinks about Byun Tae-min's brother. He thinks about the sewn mouth girl in the lab. Thinks about 47 names on a list he hasn't read, but already knows by heart. Lee finishes the ankle and moves to his shoulder. She cuts away the ruined cloak and the shirt underneath, and she sees the scar. It starts at his right hand and crawls up his forearm and past his elbow and keeps going, black and gnarled and pulsing faintly, following the path of the soul drain like a roadmap of every bullet he's ever fired. She touches it, and her fingers come away cold. She says the weapon bonded deeper than she thought. She says at this rate he's got maybe 4 days before his body just stops. Jae-won says he's heard that before and he's still here. Lee gives him a look that says, "Don't be an idiot." She goes to the shelf and pulls down a leather-bound journal. It's similar to Shim's, but older, more worn. The page is yellowed and brittle. She opens it to a marked page, and hands it to him. The handwriting is neat and clinical, and it describes in exact detail how the pistol was designed not just as a weapon, but as a battery. Every bullet fired stores the shooter's life force inside the weapon. Every shot makes the pistol stronger, and if the pistol runs completely dry, it can be recharged. Jae-won reads the sentence 3 times. Recharged. He asks how. Lee's face is stone. She says the pistol feeds on soul essence, and the most concentrated source of soul essence in this world is the life force of a magical creature. She says the Academy keeps a menagerie under the East Wing. She says it's where the headmaster stores his rarest specimens, and one of them is a captive phoenix. A phoenix? Jae-won almost laughs because of course it's a phoenix, and of course it's under the East Wing. And of course, he has to break into a menagerie with a shattered ankle and a dead arm and 4 days to live. He asks if there's another way. Lee says if there is, she hasn't found it in 6 years of looking. She helps him up. He's unsteady, but the bandage holds, and the ankle doesn't buckle. And that's about as good as it's going to get. He asks when they go. Lee says now, and the alarms are still screaming, and the Academy is still hunting him, and our boy has 0 bullets and a body that's running on spite. And painkillers. They move through the sub-basement corridors. Lee knows every turn and every blind spot and every patrol route. She's been mapping this place since she was 17 years old, and she moves through it like a ghost. Jae-won limps behind her and tries not to breathe too loud. The menagerie entrance is a reinforced steel door with a magical lock. Lee pulls out a device that looks like a tuning fork crossed with a circuit board. She presses it to the lock and hums a frequency, and the door clicks open. Jae-won asks where she got that. Lee says she built it from parts she stole from the alchemy lab over the course of 18 months, and she says it like it's no big deal. The menagerie is dark and humid, and it smells like ozone and old blood. Creatures move in cages along the walls. Some of them are small and frightened. Some of them are large and watch with intelligent eyes. All of them are prisoners. At the center of the room, in a cage twice the size of all the others, is the phoenix. It's not what Jae-won expected. It's not a majestic firebird with wings of flame. It's a creature the size of a large dog with dull gray feathers and eyes the color of dying embers. Its right wing is pinned to the cage wall with iron spikes, and there's a suppression collar around its neck that pulses with a cold blue light. It's been here a long time. Lee says the collar blocks its magic, and the spikes keep it from regenerating. She says a healthy phoenix would burn this whole building to ash in about 30 seconds. This one can barely lift its head. Jae-won approaches the cage, and the phoenix watches him. Its eyes track his movement, and he sees something in them. Not fear. Not hope. Recognition. The phoenix knows what he's carrying. He pulls out the pistol, and the phoenix makes a sound that's somewhere between a cry and a sigh. It stretches its neck toward him, and the collar crackles, and the phoenix flinches. But it doesn't look away. Jae-won raises the pistol and presses it to the creature's chest. His finger is on the trigger. 1 shot and he gets 3 bullets. 3 bullets to kill the headmaster and destroy the core and end this nightmare. The phoenix is an animal, and it's suffering, and it would probably be a mercy. But our boy hesitates. He thinks about Lee's sister and the 17 students in the medical ward, and Byun's brother in the incinerator, and Mira's face on the oil, painting smiling forever at 19. He thinks about all the innocent things this academy has killed. He thinks about becoming one more thing that kills something innocent. He lowers the pistol. Lee says his name like a warning. He says he can't. He says if he kills this creature, then he's no different from the headmaster, and he didn't come this far to become the villain. The phoenix makes that sound again, louder this time, and then something impossible happens. The phoenix speaks, not out loud, but inside Jae-won's head, a voice like embers crackling, old and tired and full of fire. It says it knows what he seeks. It says it can give him what he needs without dying for it. It says it will offer a feather freely given, and the feather contains enough soul essence for exactly 3 bullets. Jae-won stares at the creature. He asks what it wants in return. The phoenix says freedom, and it says it like a prayer. He looks at Lee. She's staring at the phoenix, and her face is unreadable, and then she nods. She says a willing offering is more powerful than a stolen one, and she says it like she's quoting something old. She pulls out her tuning fork device and approaches the cage lock. The lock clicks, and the door swings open, and Lee moves to the wing spikes. She pulls them out one by one, and the phoenix shudders but doesn't make a sound. Then she reaches for the suppression collar, and her hands hesitate. She says if she removes it, the phoenix will be at full power, and if it decides to burn them, they'll be ash before they can blink. Jae-won looks at the phoenix, and the phoenix looks at him. He asks if it will burn them. The phoenix says it has been caged for 43 years, and it wants only to see the sky. And if they free it, they will never have reason to fear. Fire again. Our boy says that's good enough for him. Lee works the collar's mechanism. 5 seconds of tension and a sharp crack, and the collar falls to the floor and the blue light dies. Phoenix draws a breath, and something ignites behind its eyes, and then the gray feathers catch fire. It's not a slow transformation. 1 second the creature is small and broken, and the next it's a column of flame that fills the entire cage, and the heat hits Jae-won like a physical force, and he stumbles back. The phoenix spreads its wings, and the fire is gold and red and white, and it's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. The creature turns its burning head toward him and plucks a single feather from its chest with its beak. It drops the feather at Jae-won's feet, and the feather glows like a dying star, and it pulses with the same rhythm as Shim's bullet, the same rhythm as his sister's soul. Jae-won picks up the feather and the pistol in his other hand hums. He touches the feather to the barrel, and the weapon drinks it. The feather dissolves into light that flows into the runes along the pistol's grip, and the barrel glows, and a counter appears in his mind like it was always there. 3 rounds. The pistol is warm in his hand, and his heart beats wrong, beat wrong. And then for the first time in 2 days, it beats right. He looks at his reflection in the cage glass. He's still old and ruined and dying, but the gray in his hair has pulled back just a little, and the hollows in his cheeks aren't quite as deep. The phoenix gave him more than bullets, gave him time. The phoenix looks at him one last time, and then it turns toward the menagerie ceiling. It screeches, and the sound shakes the room, and every creature in every cage goes silent. Then it launches upward, and its body turns to pure fire, and it punches through steel and concrete and stone like they're tissue paper. Daylight pours through the hole, and Jae-won sees sky for the first time in what feels like years. The phoenix climbs and climbs and keeps climbing until it's a dot of fire against the blue. And then it's gone. The alarms are screaming twice as loud now, and the menagerie is filling with smoke. Lee grabs his arm and says they need to move. Jae-won doesn't argue. They retrace their steps through the sub-basement corridors. His ankle is a steady throb of pain, but the phoenix feather bottoms something, and he can almost walk without leaning on the wall. His left arm still hangs dead at his side, but his right hand grips the pistol, and the pistol has 3 bullets. 3 bullets and a promise. Back in Lee's apartment, she bars the door and collapses into a chair. She looks exhausted, and her hands are shaking, and she says that was the stupidest thing she's ever done. Jae-won says it worked. Lee says it worked because the phoenix chose to be merciful, and she says next time they might not be so lucky. He asks if there's going to be a next time. She looks at him like he's an idiot again. She pulls a file from her shelf. It's thick, and it's labeled in her neat handwriting. She says she's been gathering intelligence for 6 years, and most of it is on the headmaster's endgame. She says the ritual, the mass drain, the reason he's been stockpiling student life force for 2 decades. She opens the file and spreads photographs across the table. They show the main amphitheater. They show runic circles carved into the floor. They show a schedule and a moon phase chart, and a list of every student ranked C tier and below. She says the headmaster is going to activate the gate during the full moon in 3 days. He says he's going to drain the magic from every low-ranked student in the academy to power it. She says if he succeeds, the gate opens permanently, and whatever is on the other side comes through. Jae-won looks at the photographs and the schedules and the list of names. He sees Byun Tae-min's name. He sees the 5 kids in the pumping station. He sees hundreds of students who have no idea they're being farmed. He asks how they stop it. Lee pulls out one more photograph. It shows the amphitheater undercroft, a space beneath the stage accessed through a maintenance tunnel. She says the tunnel connects to a junction box that controls the barrier array. If they can get into the undercroft before the ritual starts, she can disable the barrier, and he can take the shot. 1 shot, 3 bullets, 1 headmaster. He asks if 3 bullets is enough to punch through the headmaster's defenses. Lee doesn't answer right away. Then she says the headmaster is S tier, and S tier mages can deflect almost anything. She says normal bullets won't work, and even the pistol's rounds might not be enough unless he lands a direct shot, and the headmaster's guard is down. Jae-won loads a bullet into the chamber and feels the weight of it, and thinks about Mira and Lee's sister, and 47 students, and a phoenix. Chose mercy. He says he'll find a way. He says he didn't come this far to miss. Lee looks at him for a long time. Then she pulls out a small glass vial from her pocket. Inside is a liquid the color of moonlight. She says it's a perception enhancer, and it'll sharpen his aim for about 10 seconds, and then it'll knock him unconscious for 6 hours. She says it's a last resort. Jae-won takes the vial and pockets it next to the mana destabilizer, and shims bullet casing. He asks what happens after. If he kills the headmaster and destroys the core and stops the ritual, what happens to him? Lee doesn't sugarcoat it. She says at his current rate of decay, he might survive long enough to see the phoenix rise one more time. Maybe, if he's careful and he doesn't fire more than he has to, and the headmaster dies clean. Jae-won nods and it doesn't scare him. He's been dying since the first bullet, and every day since then has been borrowed time. And now he's got 3 bullets and a plan, and an ally who's been fighting this war longer than he has. That's more than he had yesterday. He lies down on Lee's cot, and she drapes a blanket over him, and he stares at the ceiling and counts the cracks. His heart beats wrong beat right, and his ankle throbs, and his arm is dead weight, and he's the oldest 20-year-old in the world. But the pistol is warm under his hand, and the phoenix feather is still singing somewhere in his blood. Lee sits in her chair and watches the door, and sharpens a knife that looks like it's seen use. She doesn't ask him if he's scared. She doesn't tell him it's going to be okay. She just sits there and keeps watch while our boy drifts towards sleep. Guess what he dreams about? Not Mira this time. Not the headmaster or the gate or the phoenix. He dreams about the sky and the hole the phoenix punched through the ceiling and the way the daylight looked pouring into that dark place. He dreams about standing in the light with the pistol in his hand and no more bullets to fire. He dreams about rest. But the alarms are still screaming, and somewhere above him the headmaster is preparing his ritual. And 3 days is not a lot of time. 3 days to heal a shattered ankle and a dead arm, and a soul that's been leaking out of him 1 bullet at a time. 3 days to plan the kill shot that ends a 2-decade nightmare. He opens his eyes, and the lantern is still burning, and Lee is still watching the door. She glances at him and asks if he slept. He says a little. She says good. She says he's going to need it. Then she stands up and pulls a second knife from her boot and hands it to him. She says the pistol is for the headmaster, but the tunnel to the undercroft is going to be guarded, and he might need something quieter. Jae-won takes the knife, and it's heavy and well-balanced, and the edge gleams in the lantern light. He asks when they move. Lee says tomorrow at dusk, through the old aqueduct that runs under the amphitheater. She says Byun-tae Min's group has been working on the service tunnel breach, and by tomorrow, it should be through. She says if they coordinate, they can hit the undercroft from 2 angles. Our boy thinks about Byun and Eun-byul and Ha-jun and the 5 kids who've been living in the dark for 6 months. He thinks about the mana destabilizer in his pocket. He thinks about the perception enhancer, and the knife, and the 3 bullets in his pistol. He's still outnumbered and outgunned and dying by inches. But for the first time in a long time, he's not alone. In Lee's hideout, Jae-won lies on a narrow cot shoved against a water-stained wall. His body is a wreck, and he knows it. 70 years old and every joint screaming. Skin paper-thin over knuckles that look like knobs of driftwood. Lee's charm glows faintly from a leather cord around his wrist. A pale blue pulse that eases the worst of the ache, but does not fix anything. He stares at the ceiling and counts the cracks for the 100th time. 12 cracks branching like a river delta, spreading outward from a water stain shaped like a closed fist. His left arm still hangs dead at his side. Useless weight he has learned to carry. His ankle throbs under Lee's splint, a dull drumbeat that never stops. But his heart is beating right again, and that is something. The phoenix feather did more than recharge the pistol. It gave him time, maybe enough to finish what he started. And that is more than he had any right to expect. Lee sits at her workbench with her back to him, shoulders hunched over something she will not let him see. She has been silent for the past hour. Jae-won pushes himself up on his good arm, and the cot creaks like it is about to give out. He asks if she is going to tell him what she is working on, or if he has to guess. Lee does not turn around, but her shoulders tighten. She says she is not working on anything he needs to worry about, and he should rest. Our boy is not buying that for a second. He swings his legs off the cot, and the floor is cold against his bare feet, and the charm pulses once like a warning. He limps toward the workbench, and Lee finally turns, and what she is holding makes him stop cold. It is a photograph, old and creased and worn at the edges, faded to sepia tones except for the face in the center. A girl with Lee's sharp cheekbones and Lee's determined jaw, maybe 14 years old, wearing a Celestia Academy uniform with a first-year pin on the collar. Jae-won does not need to ask who she is, but he asks anyway, because some things need to be spoken out loud. Lee says the girl's name is Soo-yoon, and she was the first one, and she lasted 6 minutes and 17 seconds after the bullet hit her. She says the headmaster told her Soo-yoon died bravely, and that her sacrifice would advance magical research by decades, and that she should be proud. She says she believed him for 2 years, and that is the part that still makes her want to burn the whole academy to the ground. Jae-won stands there with his dead arm and his shattered ankle,
and his 70-year-old body. And he does not say anything because there is nothing to say. He knows what it is to believe a lie because the truth is too ugly to face. He knows what it is to carry a dead sibling like a stone around your neck. Lee puts the photograph face down on the workbench, and her hands are steady, but her voice is not. She says she has been planning this for 18 months, and she has mapped every tunnel and bribed every contact and stolen every document, and now there are 3 days left, and she is terrified she will fail. She says if she fails, then Soo-yoon died for nothing, and 47 students are just numbers on a report. And the headmaster wins. Jae-won picks up the photograph and looks at Soo-yoon's face and sees Mira's face and sees every student who ever trusted the wrong adult. He says she is not going to fail because she is not alone anymore. And that has to count for something. Lee looks at him, and her eyes are wet, but her jaw is set, and she nods once like she is locking something into place. Then she pulls out a thick file from under the workbench and spreads it open on the table. Photographs of the main amphitheater cover half the surface. Shots taken from every angle and every entrance and every shadow. The other half is covered in runic diagrams, sketched in Lee's precise handwriting. Circles within circles. Arrows showing the flow of magical energy. She says the ritual is not just a mass drain, and it is worse than he thinks. She points to the largest diagram, a 7-pointed star inside a ring of binding runes, and says the headmaster is not just taking their magic. He is taking everything. Their life force, their memories, their souls. Every spark of what makes them human gets stripped out and funneled into the gate. The magic is just the ignition key, and the real fuel is the students themselves. Jae-won stares at the diagram and feels the cold weight of the pistol against his ribs and thinks about 3 bullets. 3 bullets against a ritual that devours hundreds. Lee says the headmaster has been planning this for 20 years, and every extraction subject was a test run, and every missing student was a calibration. She says the C-tier and below students are not targets because they are weak, and they are targets because they are numerous. Quantity matters more than quality when you are feeding a gate, and 400 C-tier souls pack more punch than a dozen A-tier mages. Our boy's jaw tightens, and his good hand curls into a fist, and the charm on his wrist pulses faster. Lee flips to the next page, and it is a schedule printed on official academy letterhead, stamped with the headmaster's personal seal. The ritual commences at moonrise on the 3rd night, and every student ranked C-tier and below is required to attend in full ceremonial uniform. Attendance is mandatory, and absences will be investigated. And the wording is so clinical and bureaucratic that it makes Jae-won want to put a bullet through the page. Lee says the amphitheater seats 600, and the headmaster expects every seat filled, and the runic circle is already carved into the stage under, a concealing illusion. She traced it herself 3 weeks ago, disguised as a maintenance worker, and the scale of it still gives her nightmares. Jae-won asks how they stop it, and Lee points to a smaller diagram in the corner of the page. It shows the amphitheater's undercroft, a honeycomb of support chambers and drainage tunnels directly beneath the stage. She says the runic array is powered by a secondary barrier generator housed in the undercroft, and if they can reach it before the ritual starts, can disable the protective field around the headmaster. No barrier means a clear shot, and a clear shot means the ritual stops because the headmaster is the linchpin, and without him, the whole thing collapses. Jae-won traces the tunnel routes with his finger and memorizes every junction and every access point. His mind is already running scenarios and angles and sightlines. One shot through a broken barrier, and it is over. One bullet to end a 20-year nightmare. He asks how they get into the undercroft without triggering every alarm in the academy. Lee smiles for the first time all night, and it is not a nice smile. She pulls out a map that makes the hair on Jae-won's arms stand up. The map shows a network of service passages that predate the academy itself. Old aqueducts and maintenance tunnels that were sealed off decades ago and erased from every official blueprint. Lee says she found the entrance 3 years ago in a forgotten corner of the boiler room, and she has spent every night since then exploring every inch of it. The tunnels run under the entire academy, and one branch passes directly beneath the amphitheater stage. And there is a junction box right under the barrier generator. She says if they can reach that junction box before moonrise, she can short out the barrier from inside the undercroft, and the headmaster will never see it coming. Jae-won asks how long the barrier will stay down, and Lee says 30 seconds at most before the backup generator kicks in. 30 seconds to line up the shot and pull the trigger and end everything. He thinks about the perception enhancer in his pocket, and the mana destabilizer, and the knife, and the 3 bullets that hold the soul of a phoenix, and the last gift of a girl named Soo-yoon. He says 30 seconds is more than enough,
and Lee looks at him and does not argue. Lee pushes the map aside and reaches into a cabinet bolted to the wall and pulls out a collection of supplies that makes Jae-won's eyebrows rise. Glass vials filled with gray powder, strips of treated cloth, a spool of copper wire, and a small clay pot sealed with wax. She says the gray powder is a smoke compound she learned to make from an old alchemy textbook in the forbidden section. One vial creates a cloud dense enough to blind even an A-tier mage for about 2 minutes. She has 6 vials, and she is giving 3 to Jae-won. Our boy takes them and tucks them into the pouch on his belt, and the weight is reassuring. Lee picks up the copper wire and says it is for bypassing runic locks, and the technique is ugly but effective. She spent 6 months practicing on a lock she stole from the medical ward's supply closet, and now she can pop a standard runic seal in under 40 seconds. Jae-won watches her hands move as she demonstrates, and her fingers are quick and precise, and he understands why she has survived this long alone. Then she picks up the pistol and holds it in both hands like it is a live thing that might bite her. She asks if he has cleaned it since the menagerie, and Jae-won admits he has not. And Lee clicks her tongue like a disappointed instructor. She pulls out a cleaning kit from her cabinet and spreads it on the workbench, and spends the next 20 minutes breaking down the pistol and oiling every component and checking every rune. Jae-won watches her work and feels something twist in his chest. She treats the weapon like it is sacred, and maybe it is. Lee finishes cleaning the pistol and hands it back, and her fingers brush his, and she does not pull away. She says there is something else he needs to know, and her voice is different now, quieter, like she is opening a door she has kept locked for a very long time. She says the reason she knows so much about the pistol and the gate and the ritual is not just because her sister was the first test subject. She says she was supposed to be the second. Jae-won goes very still, and the pistol is cold in his hand, and the charm on his wrist stops pulsing. Lee says after Soo-yoon died, the headmaster called her into his office and told her she had the same magical resonance as her sister, and she would be perfect for the next phase of testing. She was 13 years old, and she had just lost her sister, and the headmaster was smiling, and she ran. She ran, and she kept running, and she has been running for 7 years, and every day she has been waiting for them to find her and drag her back. She says she is tired of running, and if she is going to die, she is going to die making sure the headmaster never hurts another kid. Jae-won looks at Lee and sees the same thing he sees in the mirror every morning. Someone who has been carrying a dead sibling so long it has become part of their skeleton. Someone who has nothing left to lose but refuses to lose anyway. He says she is not going to die because he is not going to let that happen, and she has been fighting this war longer than he has, and she deserves to see the end of it. Lee does not cry, but her eyes glisten, and she looks away and her jaw works silently for a long moment. Then she straightens up, and her voice is all business again, and she says they need to coordinate with Byun Tae-min's group. Service tunnel breach should be through by tomorrow evening, and if they time it right, they can hit the undercroft from 2 angles. Lee takes the main passage and disables the barrier generator, while Jae-won and Byun's group create a diversion topside. The diversion draws the enforcers away from the amphitheater and gives Lee a clear window to reach the junction box. Once the barrier drops, Jae-won has 30 seconds to get into position and take the shot. 1 bullet, and it is over. Jae-won asks where he needs to be to get a clean line of sight, and Lee pulls out another diagram, this one showing the amphitheater seating and stage layout. She points to a maintenance catwalk 30 feet above the stage, accessible from the Upper East Corridor, hidden behind a false wall panel. The angle gives a direct sightline to the headmaster's position at the center of the runic circle, and the distance is less than 40 feet. 40 feet, even a dying man with 1 good arm can hit his target. Our boy memorizes the catwalk location and the access route, and every landmark between here and there. He has been waiting 3 years for this shot, and he is not going to miss. Lee rolls up the maps and diagrams and slides them into a waterproof tube and hands it to Jae-won. She says he should keep these on him at all times, in case they get separated, and he needs to find his own way to the catwalk. Jae-won takes the tube and straps it across his back, and the weight is nothing compared to the weight he has been carrying. He looks at Lee and she looks back, and neither of them says what they are both thinking. The odds are terrible, and the plan has a dozen failure points. And even if everything goes perfectly, there is a good chance neither of them walks away. But the alternative is letting the headmaster murder 400 kids, and that is not an alternative at all. Lee breaks the silence first and says they should get some sleep, and tomorrow, they will move at dusk through the old aqueduct. She says Byun's group should have the breach finished by then, and she will send a signal through the maintenance pipes to confirm. Jae-won nods and limps back to the cot, and the charm on his wrist pulses softly, and his heart beats steady and true. He lies down and the pistol is warm against his ribs, and the knife is under his pillow, and the smoke bombs are in his pouch, and the maps are strapped to his back. He has 3 bullets and 1 ally, and a plan that might just be crazy enough to work. That is more than he had yesterday, and yesterday felt impossible too. Lee sits in her chair and watches the door and sharpens her knife, and the lantern burns low. She does not ask him if he is scared. She does not tell him it is going to be okay. She just sits there and keeps watch while the hours crawl toward dawn, and the full moon creeps closer, and 400 students go about their days, not knowing their lives depend on a dying man with a cursed pistol. Guess what our boy thinks about as he drifts toward sleep? Not Mira this time, not the gate or the headmaster or the phoenix. He thinks about 30 seconds and 40 feet and the weight of a trigger under his finger. He thinks about a clean shot and a broken barrier, and the look on the headmaster's face when he realizes his 20-year plan is ending with a bullet between his eyes. He thinks about Lee and Soo-yoon, and 47 extraction subjects and every student the headmaster has ever used and discarded. He thinks about rest. But rest is still 3 days away, and a lot can go wrong in 3 days, and our boy knows it. He opens his eyes, and the lantern is still burning, and Lee is still watching the door. And somewhere above them, the headmaster is preparing his ritual, and the clock is ticking. He exhales, and his grip tightens on the pistol, and his heart beats wrong beat right, and then settles into a rhythm that feels almost like hope. Passage is narrow and wet, and smells like rust and rot and old stone that has been soaking in filth for decades. Lee goes first with a lantern in one hand and a copper probe in the other. Jae-won limps behind her, and his ankle screams with every step, and his left arm hangs useless at his side. The walls are covered in runes that pulse with a faint, sickly green light. He stops and points at the first rune and says it is a pressure trigger keyed to body weight. She presses the probe against the stone, and the rune flickers and dies, and she moves forward. 3 more runes line the next 10 feet, and each one is a different trigger, and each one requires a different bypass. Our boy watches her work, and he does not interrupt, because she has been planning this for 18 months, and she knows every inch of these tunnels. A low hum starts building somewhere behind the walls, and Jae-won feels it in his teeth. He says the barrier generator is on the other side, and it is cycling up for the ritual prep. They are running out of time. She disables 2 more runes, and her hands do not shake, and her breathing stays steady. And she looks like a woman who has already made peace with whatever happens next. Jae-won checks the pistol, and the 3 bullets are warm against his hip, and the weight is both a comfort and a countdown. They reach a junction where the passage splits 3 ways, and Lee does not hesitate. She takes the left fork, and the ceiling drops lower, and they have to crouch, and the stone is slick with condensation, and something skitters in the dark ahead. Lee says it is just rats, and she sounds almost amused, and Jae-won wonders when the last time was that anything in his life was just rats. They crawl for maybe 50 feet, and then the passage opens into a wider chamber with a sealed iron door at the far end. The door is massive and black and covered in more runes than Jae-won has ever seen in one place. Lee sets the lantern down and cracks her knuckles and says this is the main junction box and she needs 40 seconds. Jae-won turns to keep watch, and the tunnel behind them is dark and silent. And that is somehow worse than footsteps. He counts the seconds in his head, and at 23, he hears it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, and coming from the main passage they just crawled through. Jae-won does not need to see the face to know who it is. The rhythm is wrong, and the weight is too heavy for a normal human, and there is a faint mechanical whine underneath each step, like servos straining against flesh. Lee asks if they have company, and Jae-won says Kwon, and she does not ask how he knows. She just works faster, and the copper wire glows in her hands, and the runes on the door start flickering one by one. The footsteps stop at the mouth of the junction, and the lantern light catches the edge of a silhouette. Kwon Do-yoon steps into the chamber, and he is not the same person who betrayed Jae-won in the power core room. Half his body is metal now, and his left arm is a piston-driven claw, and his chest is a patchwork of flesh and steel plates. His face is still human on one side, and the other side is a ceramic mask with a single red eye that glows like a dying star. He looks at Jae-won, and his voice comes out distorted and flat, and he says he gave our boy a chance. Lee glances back, and her face goes tight, and she says she needs 20 more seconds. Jae-won draws the pistol and chambers around, and the barrel glows faintly in the dark. He tells Kwon to walk away, and Kwon laughs, and it is a horrible sound, and it echoes off the stone like grinding gears. Kwon says the headmaster offered him a better deal, and now he is strong enough to kill a man with a cursed weapon, and Jae-won is just a dying old man with 3 bullets and a broken body. Jae-won does not argue, and he does not monologue, and he just raises the pistol and fires. The first bullet slams into Kwan's left shoulder, and the soul weight hits like a freight train. And metal screeches, and tears, and the piston arm hangs limp. Kwan staggers, and his red eye flickers, and he says that stung. He is still standing and he is still moving, and the arm is already grinding as some internal repair system kicks in. Our boy feels the cost hit him immediately, and his knees buckle, and a new ache settles deep in his bones. He shouts that she needs 10 seconds, and Jae-won steadies himself against the wall and racks the slide. Kwan swings his right arm, and a blade extends from the forearm, and it hums with some kind of energy that makes the air shimmer. The blade comes down, and Jae-won throws himself sideways, and the stone floor where he was standing splits open like wet paper. He lands hard on his bad ankle, and the pain is white-hot, and his vision doubles for a second. Kwan recovers faster than anything that size should be able to move, and he is already swinging again, and Jae-won does not have time to aim. He fires the second bullet blind, and it clips the edge of Kwan's metal skull, and the ceramic mask spiderwebs but does not shatter. The bullet ricochets off the wall and punches a hole through a rune, and the rune explodes in green sparks. And somewhere behind them, the barrier generator lets out a high-pitched whine. Lee screams that she needs 5 seconds, and Jae-won coughs, and there is blood in his mouth now. His body is failing faster, and the second shot aged him another year. And his heart is doing that wrong beat-right rhythm again. Kwan straightens up, and half his mask is cracked, and the flesh underneath is gray and dead. And he grins with the half of his mouth that still works. He says Jae-won is running out of bullets, and running out of time, and running out of everything that matters. Jae-won looks at the pistol, and the third bullet is still in the chamber, and it glows brighter than the others, and he knows why. The Phoenix Feather bullet, the one that carries 3 charges in 1 round, and he has been saving it for the headmaster. He has no choice now. Kwan lunges, and the arm blade drives forward, and Jae-won does not dodge this time. He drops to one knee, and the blade passes over his shoulder, and he presses the pistol against Kwan's exposed core. The core is a glowing crystal set into the center of his chest, and it pulses in time with the repair systems, and it is the only thing keeping him alive. Jae-won fires. The Phoenix bullet punches through the crystal, and the explosion of light is blinding, and Kwan's whole body convulses as the core shatters. He does not scream, and he does not curse, and he just stares at Jae-won with his one human eye, and for half a second, he looks like the student who once let a magicless kid walk away. Then he collapses, and the metal parts of his body fall with a clatter that echoes through the chamber, and the red eye goes dark. Jae-won stays on his knee, and the pistol is empty now, and his hand is shaking so badly he can barely hold on to the grip. Lee shouts that the door is open, and she turns around and sees him there, and sees Kwan's body. And she does not say anything for a long moment. She just crosses the chamber and crouches next to him, and checks his pulse, and her face is unreadable. Jae-won asks how many bullets he has left, and his voice is a rasp, and he already knows the answer. Lee does not say it, and she does not have to. 0 bullets, and the headmaster's ritual is still happening, and the barrier generator is still humming on the other side of that door. Jae-won looks at the pistol, and the chamber is empty, and the barrel is dark, and it feels like a lump of dead metal in his hand. 3 years of hunting, and 3 bullets from a phoenix, and he spent them all on a pawn. He laughs, and it comes out bitter and wet, and he tastes copper on his tongue. Lee grabs his collar and pulls him up, and her grip is iron, and her eyes are burning, and she says this is not over. She says they did not crawl through a sewer and disarm 30 runes and kill a half-machine enforcer just to quit now. Jae-won looks at her, and she is covered in sweat and soot, and her hands are bleeding from the copper wire, and she looks like a woman who has been fighting for 7 years and is not about to stop because one man ran out of bullets. He asks what they are supposed to do without a weapon, and Lee lets go of his collar, and her mouth sets in a hard line. She says the plan has not changed, and the barrier still needs to drop, and the headmaster still needs to die. She says they will find another way, and if there is no bullet, then they will find something else sharp enough to do the job. Jae-won looks at the open door and the darkness beyond it, and the hum of the barrier generator is louder now. The ritual is still hours away, and there is still time and he is still breathing, and that is more than a lot of people can say. He pushes himself to his feet, and his ankle buckles, and Lee catches him, and he does not pull away. He checks the pistol one more time, and the chamber is still empty, and the barrel is still dark, and he tucks it back into his belt. Lee picks up the lantern, and the flame gutters and steadies, and she steps through the door. Jae-won follows her, and behind them Kwan's body lies still and cold, and the green runes flicker and die one by one as the passage seals itself shut. The undercroft is massive and dark, and the barrier generator sits at the center of the room like a metal heart pulsing with blue light. Lee studies the generator, and her jaw tightens, and she says, "This is a military-grade ward system, and her copper wire is not going to cut it." She says she needs a physical key or a direct mana override, and she has neither of those things. Jae-won looks around the undercroft, and the walls are lined with pipes and conduits, and there is a maintenance panel near the generator that hums with its own power source. He limps toward it, and the panel is sealed with a standard lock, and he does not have a key. But he does have a knife. He wedges the blade into the seam and pries, and the panel pops open with a screech of protesting metal. Inside there are wires and switches, and a single large breaker labeled Main Power Feed. Jae-won looks at Lee, and she looks at him, and she understands, and she does not try to stop him. She says if he pulls that breaker, the feedback will fry every circuit in the junction box, and the whole undercroft will go dark. She says it will also send a surge straight through whoever is holding the panel. Jae-won asks how long she needs after the barrier drops, and she says 30 seconds to get into position, and 30 seconds to take the shot. She does not ask what shot he is going to take, and he does not tell her he has no bullets left. He just nods and wraps his fingers around the breaker handle, and his good hand is steady, and his heart is beating wrong, and his body is falling apart. And none of it matters anymore. He tells Lee to get to the catwalk, and she hesitates for 1 second, and then she is gone. And the lantern light fades, and Jae-won is alone in the dark. With a breaker switch and an empty pistol. He closes his eyes, and the hum of the generator fills his head, and he thinks about Mira and Soo-yun, and 47 extraction subjects and 400 students who do not know their lives depend on a dying man with no bullets. He thinks about rest, and he lets that thought go, and he pulls the breaker. The surge hits him like a thunderclap, and his whole body locks up, and the current tears through his dead left arm and sets every nerve on fire. The generator lets out a shriek, and the blue light stutters and dies. And somewhere above them, the protective field around the headmaster flickers and vanishes. 30 seconds, and Jae-won cannot move, and the panel is sparking and smoking, and the undercroft is pitch black. He drops to his knees, and the pistol clatters on the stone, and his vision is going dark at the edges, and his heart is skipping beats like a broken record. 20 seconds, and Lee is climbing to the catwalk, and the barrier is down, and the headmaster is exposed for the first time in 20 years. 10 seconds, and Jae-won is still on his knees, and the pistol is still empty, and there are no bullets left, and there are no miracles left, and there is only this and only now. The generator dies with a final wheeze, and the undercroft goes silent, and Jae-won is alone in the dark with nothing but his grief and his rage and the weight of everything he could not save. He reaches for the pistol, and his fingers close around the grip, and the metal is cold and dead and empty. 0 bullets in 30 seconds are almost up, and the ritual is still going to happen, and 400 kids are still going to die. And our boy is still on his knees in the dark with no plan and no weapon and no way out. The darkness presses in, and Jae-won's heartbeat is a skipping record. He can't feel his right leg anymore, and his left arm is a dead weight. The pistol is a cold lump in his hand, and there are no bullets left. Somewhere above him, the ritual chants haven't started yet, and that's the only good news. His body gives out, and he slumps sideways onto the cold stone. He hears Lee's footsteps above on the catwalk, and then a sharp inhale. She's seen him, and she isn't climbing anymore. She's falling through the darkness. She lands beside him with a muffled thud, and her lantern is gone. The dim blue light from the dying generator casts her face in a sickly glow. She grabs his collar and hauls him upright, and her hands are shaking. She says his name once, and then again, and he tries to answer, but all that comes out is a wet rasp. His chest feels like someone poured molten lead into his lungs. Lee pulls off his mask, and her eyes go wide at the ruin of his face. She says he looks 100 years old, and she doesn't mean it as an insult. Jae-won manages to croak that he has 0 bullets, and the barrier is down, and he can't do it. Lee's jaw tightens, and she says she knows one more spell. He asks what kind of spell, and she doesn't answer right away. She says it's a life transfer ritual, and she found it in an old necromancy tome in the Forbidden Stacks. She says she has never used it because it costs the caster everything. Jae-won's half-dead brain puts the pieces together, and he tries to push her away. He tells her no, and he tells her to get out and finish the job herself. Lee grabs his wrist, and her grip is iron. She says the pistol is keyed to grief, and it won't fire for her, and they both know it. He shakes his head and croaks that he won't let her. He says it's already done, and she made her peace 18 months ago. She cups his face with one hand, and her palm is warm and rough with calluses. She tells him he's the only one who can fire the cursed gun, and the ritual needs 1 bullet to find its mark. He tries to argue, but she presses her forehead to his, and her breath is warm against his skin. She says she is not afraid, and she has waited 7 years for a chance to make it right. He doesn't have the strength to fight her, so he just closes his eyes. He kisses his forehead, and it's light as a feather, and it says goodbye in a way words can't. She straightens up, and her eyes are dry, and she starts to speak in a language that isn't human. The syllables scrape the air like broken glass, and the temperature drops 10 degrees. Her hands glow with a pale golden light, and the pistol in Jae-won's grip starts to hum. He shouts at her to stop, but his voice is a wrecked whisper. Lee's body begins to come apart at the edges, light spilling from cracks in her skin. The words she chants pour out faster and faster, and the pistol drinks them. The runes on the grip flicker once, and a single bullet crystallizes in the empty chamber. Jae-won screams, and it tears out of him raw and broken. She doesn't stop, and she doesn't slow, and her legs dissolve into a swarm of golden particles. Her torso unravels next, and the light is so bright it burns the dark out of the undercroft. Jae-won can't look away, and his tears steam on his cheeks from the heat. Lee's face is the last thing to go, and she smiles, and she mouths 2 words he can't read. Then she is gone, and all that remains is a shower of light motes that spiral up into the dark. The light motes hang in the air for 3 heartbeats, and then they wink out one by one. The pistol is warm in his hand, and the single bullet glows with a soft gold radiance. He clutches the gun to his chest, and his body shakes with a grief so heavy it might crush him. Her name is inside him, and he can't say it because his throat is locked tight. He can feel the bullet's weight, and it's not just metal and powder, it's Lee So-jin's soul. He vows in the silence that he will make this bullet count, or he will die trying. Then the ritual chants from the amphitheater above slice through the silence like a razor. Sound is distant but unmistakable. A low, droning cadence that makes the stone beneath him vibrate. Hundreds of voices are joining in, and Jae-won knows what that means. The headmaster has started the mass drain, and the students are already in their ceremonial lines. He tries to push himself to his feet, and his ankle screams, and his dead arm swings useless. He gets one knee under him, and then the other, and his whole body is on fire. He uses the wall as a crutch, and the cold stone bites into his shoulder. The stairwell at the far end of the undercroft leads up to the amphitheater stage pit. Counts the steps in his head, and there are 48, and they might as well be a mountain. He takes the first step, and it costs him a lungful of air. The second step wrenches his ankle, and he almost drops the pistol. He doesn't count after that, he just keeps climbing. And the chants get louder with every step. The stairwell is dark and narrow, and the walls are slick with moisture. His legs are shaking, and his heart is doing that wrong beat right thing again. He doesn't stop and he doesn't slow, and if he falls, he's done. The chants swell into a thunderous wall of sound that pounds against his skull. He can hear individual voices now, and some of them are screaming. He reaches the top of the stairs, and a heavy iron door stands between him and the amphitheater. He puts his shoulder against the door and pushes, and the hinges scream. The door slams open, and cold night air hits his face, and the full moon is a white eye staring down. The amphitheater is a bowl of chaos, and the tiered stone benches are packed with students in ceremonial white. Most of them are on their knees, and their mouths are open in a chant that is not their own. Sickly blue light leaks from their eyes and mouths, and streams toward the center of the stage. The headmaster stands there in his crimson robes with both arms raised. His fingers are hooked into claws, and he is pulling the life force straight out of 200 kids. Students are collapsing and convulsing on the stone benches, and some are already still. The air stinks of ozone and copper, and the pressure is so heavy it feels like walking underwater. Jae-won staggers onto the stage apron, and nobody sees him because they are all too busy dying. His vision is swimming, and his legs are buckling, but he locks his knees and raises the pistol. The pistol comes up slow and heavy, and the golden bullet burns cold against his palm. He can see the headmaster's heart because the old man's chest is lit from within by a pulsing blue orb. The gate seed embedded in his sternum drinks the life force of 400 students and channels it into the air above. A tear is forming in the sky right above the amphitheater, a crack in the world that bleeds starless black. The headmaster's face is twisted in ecstasy, and he hasn't noticed the dying old man with the pistol. Jae-won sights down the barrel, and his hand is as steady as it's ever been. The golden bullet is Lee, and he is not going to miss. He exhales once, and his finger settles on the trigger, and everything goes quiet inside his head. He aims for the center of that blue orb, and he is 10 paces away, and he has exactly 1 shot. He squeezes the trigger, and the world holds its breath. The golden bullet leaves the barrel at a speed that shatters the sound barrier, and the crack is deafening. It crosses the 10 paces between Jae-won and the headmaster in less time than it takes a heart to beat. The headmaster's smirk doesn't falter, because he's been waiting for this exact moment for 20 years. His right hand flicks up, and a shimmering barrier snaps into place around him. It's not the Academy's protective field that Lee disabled in the Undercroft. This is a personal defense ward keyed to the gate seat itself, and it burns with the same sickly blue light. The bullet hits the barrier dead center, and the impact rings out like a bell forged from pure malice. Jae-won watches the golden light of Lee's soul round flatten against the shield, and his heart stops. The bullet ricochets, and the sound it makes is a wet, horrible thing. It slams into the chest of a young student, kneeling 3 tiers up from the stage apron. She's maybe 14 years old with braids in her hair, and her ceremonial robes are already soaked with sweat from the drain. The bullet punches through her ribcage, and she doesn't scream because the chant has stolen her voice. She simply crumples forward and hits the stone bench with a soft, final thud. Nobody around her notices, and nobody stops chanting, and the blue light keeps streaming from her dead open mouth. Jae-won's knees buckle, and he catches himself on one hand, and the pistol clatters against the stone. He killed her, and he knows it, and the knowledge hits harder than any bullet ever could. The headmaster's laugh rolls across the amphitheater like thunder over a graveyard. He doesn't lower the barrier, and his fingers are still hooked into claws, pulling life from 200 students. Too late! The words echo through Jae-won's skull, and they're the same words he's been dreading since the infirmary. The headmaster's eyes are twin points of blue fire, and his crimson robes billow in a wind that doesn't exist. He raises his left hand, and in his palm rests a small obsidian cylinder covered in runes that match the pistol's barrel. The gate key, and Jae-won recognizes it instantly from Shim's journal. The cylinder pulses once, and a sound like ripping canvas tears through the night air. Crack in the sky above the amphitheater widens, and the starless black inside it begins to swirl. It's not just a tear anymore, and it's becoming a mouth. A vortex opens in the heavens, and the edges burn with the same blue light that streams from the students. The headmaster feeds the gate seat in his chest, and the key in his hand, and the 2 pulses synchronize. Jae-won tries to stand, and his dead arm swings useless, and his right leg won't obey. The pistol lies on the stone 3 feet away, and he lunges for it. His fingers brush the grip, and then an invisible force yanks him off his feet. The headmaster's telekinesis slams Jae-won against a stone pillar, and the impact knocks the breath from his lungs. He hangs there, pinned 10 feet above the stage, and his ribs creak with every inhale. The pistol spins across the stone and skids to a stop at the headmaster's feet. Ma Jun-hyuk bends down and picks up the weapon with the casual disdain of a man handling a child's broken toy. He turns it over in his hands, and his fingers trace the barrel and the grip and the trigger guard. 3 years I've waited for you to bring this back to me. He says it like he's discussing the weather, and that's somehow worse than rage. Jae-won tries to speak, and the only thing that comes out is a wet rasp. Headmaster glances up at the swirling vortex, and the gate seat in his chest burns brighter. You think this weapon was meant for killing mages? He chuckles, and the sound is genuinely amused. Killing mages was a side effect and a useful one, but the pistol was a key the entire time. He holds the gun up, and the runes on the barrel align with the runes on the gate key. They click together, and the sound is final and irreversible and wrong. The pistol begins to glow, and the golden residue of Lee's bullet still clings to the barrel. It's not enough to stop him, and it's just enough to complete the circuit. Jae-won strains against the telekinetic hold, and his vision whites out from the pain. The headmaster raises both hands, and now the pistol and the key form a single, unified device. A beam of blue-white light shoots from the gun's barrel straight into the vortex above. The tear rips wider, and something on the other side roars. It's not a human sound, and it's not an animal sound, and it's older than both. Students are collapsing faster now, and the chant has become a single, sustained note of agony. Bodies litter the tiered stone benches like discarded dolls, and the blue light pools around them. Jae-won can count the ones who are still moving, and the number is shrinking by the second. Headmaster turns back to him, and his face is lit from below by the gate seed's pulsing glow. Your sister was the 4th subject and the only one who survived long enough to anchor the pistol to this world. His voice carries across the amphitheater, and Jae-won feels every word like a blade. Yoon Mi-ra's soul didn't die in that training incident, and it's been in the weapon the entire time. Jae-won screams, and it's not a word, and it's not a curse, and it's just raw, broken sound. Mira was in the gun, and he fired her at bullies and enforcers, and a phoenix and Quan. He used her soul as ammunition, and he didn't know, and the knowing doesn't make it better. Headmaster watches him scream, and his expression doesn't change. The pistol is keyed to grief because grief is the strongest anchor, and you've been feeding it for 3 years. He gestures at the vortex, and the roaring thing on the other side presses against the barrier between worlds. Now the gate is open, and I don't need the students anymore, and I don't need this academy. He lowers his hand, and the telekinetic grip on Jae-won tightens. I do need the weapon back,
and you're still attached to it through the soul link. Jae-won's vision narrows to a tunnel, and the edges are black
and closing fast. His heart does that wrong beat right rhythm, and this time it doesn't correct. The headmaster raises the pistol, and the barrel points at Jae-won's chest. He doesn't pull the trigger because he doesn't need to. He simply twists the gate key embedded in the grip, and the soul link activates in reverse. Jae-won feels something inside him tear loose, and it's not his life force, and it's worse. The pistol drinks his connection to Mira and his connection to Lee, and every scrap of grief he's ever carried. It's not a bullet, and it's not a drain, and it's an unraveling. The headmaster smiles, and it's the first genuine smile Jae-won has ever seen on that face. Goodbye, pest. He flicks his wrist, and the telekinetic force hurls Jae-won upward, not at the pillar, and not at the stage, and straight into the vortex. Jae-won's body spins through the cold night air, and the amphitheater shrinks below him. He can see students, and he can see the headmaster, and he can see the pistol glowing in the old man's grip. The vortex swallows him, and the last thing he hears is the headmaster's laughter and the roar of the gate. Then there is nothing but light and color, and the sensation of being turned inside out. Jae-won falls through a void that isn't black and isn't white, and isn't any color he has a name for. Rainbow static tears at his skin, and his dead arm burns with phantom pain. The soul link is still there, and it's stretched thin and frayed, but it hasn't broken yet. He can feel the pistol on the other side, and it's a distant throb like a second heartbeat he can't reach. The fall lasts forever, and no time at all, and his mind can't hold on to either truth. His body twists, and the charm on his wrist flares pale blue, and then the light gutters and dies. Lee's last gift spent and gone, and now there's nothing between him and the void. The static recedes, and the light dims, and gravity returns with a vengeance. Jae-won slams into hard-packed red sand, and the impact drives every last breath from his lungs. He lies there broken on his back, and the sky above him is not the night sky of Celestia Academy. The sun is a black disk ringed with violet fire, and it hangs motionless at the apex of the sky. It doesn't move and it doesn't burn, and it casts a light that is gray and cold and dead. Jae-won gasps, and sand fills his mouth, and the grit tastes like iron and ash. He rolls onto his side, and his ankle screams, and his left arm flops useless against the ground. The portal above him is already closing, and the rainbow crack in reality shrinks to a pinprick. Then it's gone, and the black sun stares down at him alone. He's in a desert that stretches to the horizon in every direction, and the sand is the color of dried blood. Rusted spires jut from the ground at odd angles, like the ribs of some long-dead behemoth. No wind blows, and no sound reaches his ears except the ragged, wet rasp of his own breathing. He has nothing, and the inventory is simple to count. No pistol, and the weight of it is an absence he feels in his bones. No bullets, and no phoenix feather, and no Lee. His right leg won't move below the knee, and his left arm is dead weight. His chest feels like someone poured molten lead into his lungs and let it set. He pushes himself up with his one good arm, and his vision swims and dark spots dance at the edges. The charm on his wrist is cracked down the middle, and the pale blue glow is completely gone. He touches it with shaking fingers, and the leather cord is frayed but still holding. Lee's face flashes behind his eyes, and the two words she mouthed in the undercroft. He still can't read them, and he probably never will. Jae-won kneels in the red sand, and the black sun burns cold above him. He failed, and Mira is still trapped in the pistol, and Lee is dead, and the headmaster has everything. 400 students and the academy and the gate and the weapon. He looks down at his hands, and they're the hands of a 70-year-old man, with nothing left to lose. The skin is paper thin, and the veins stand out blue, and the knuckles are swollen. But they're still his hands, and they can still make fists. He tightens his right hand into a claw, and the nails bite into his palm. The pain is real, and it anchors him, and it's the only thing he has left. A guttural roar splits the silence, and it's close, and it's hungry. Jae-won lifts his head, and the sound came from beyond a ridge of black rock about 200 yards to the east. The rock formation is jagged, and it looks like a shattered jawbone jutting from the sand. Another roar echoes across the desert, and this time, it's answered by a second voice further away. The creatures of this world are hunting, and they've caught the scent of something new. Jae-won forces himself to his feet, and his right leg buckles immediately. He catches himself on his one good hand, and his face hits the sand, and the grit scrapes his cheek raw. He pushes up again, and this time he stays upright by sheer stubborn will. The ridge is 200 yards away, and it might as well be the moon. But it's cover, and it's a direction, and right now that's enough. He takes one step, and his ankle gives a wet, grinding pop that sends lightning up his spine. He takes a second step anyway. Behind him, the red desert stretches empty and silent, and the black sun watches without blinking. Somewhere on the other side of a closed gate,
A madman is holding a pistol that contains his sister's soul.
Jae-won doesn't know how he's going to get back, and he doesn't know how long his body will hold. But he knows one thing, with the same cold certainty that pulled him through 48 steps in an undercroft. He is not done, and he is not dead, and the headmaster made a mistake. He threw Jae-won into another world instead of killing him, and somewhere in this wasteland, there has to be a way to reopen that gate. He limps toward the black rock ridge, and every step is a war. Roar sounds again, and this time it's closer. And the thing that made it is moving fast. Jae-won keeps walking, and his shadow stretches long and thin across the blood-red sand. Black sun hangs motionless overhead, and the rim of violet fire pulses once. Like the world itself just noticed he's here. The sand shifts under him before the roar even finishes echoing across the desert. Jae-won hears the skittering before he sees the thing making it, and the sound is wrong. It's too fast, and there's too many legs, and it's coming straight for him. He pushes off the ground with his one good arm, and his body screams at him to stop. The creature bursts over the black rock ridge, and it's the size of a horse, and it's a nightmare. 8 legs covered in chitin, the color of dried bone, and a segmented tail that curves up and forward. The tail ends in a barb the length of Jae-won's forearm, and it glistens wet in the gray light. The thing's head is mostly mouth, and its mouth is mostly teeth, arranged in 3 concentric rings. It scuttles down the ridge, and its legs don't slip once on the loose rock, and it's locked onto him. Jae-won forces himself upright, and his right ankle gives that wet, grinding pop again. He staggers backward, and his left arm swings useless and dead at his side. The scorpion beast covers 30 yards in 3 seconds flat. He sees the barb twitch, and some instinct from every fight he's survived makes him lunge sideways. The tail punches the sand where his chest was a heartbeat ago, and the impact kicks up a plume of red dust. Jae-won hits the ground on his bad shoulder, and white fire shoots down his spine. The scorpion beast pivots with horrible speed, and the barb pulls free from the sand with a wet, sucking sound. Jae-won's right hand closes on a rock, half buried in the red grip. It's about the size of his fist, and it's jagged on one edge, and it's the only weapon he has. The creature lunges, and the mouth opens wide enough to swallow his head whole. He swings the rock with everything his 70-year-old body has left. The jagged edge catches the thing in the soft tissue between 2 of the tooth rings. Black ichor sprays across Jae-won's face, and it burns like acid, and it stinks of rot. Scorpion beast shrieks, and the sound is so high-pitched it stabs into his skull. It rears back on 4 legs, and the remaining 4 slash at his chest. The chitin claws tear through what's left of his shirt, and open 4 lines of fire across his ribs. Jae-won doesn't feel the pain because the adrenaline has finally kicked in, and he's running on pure survival now. He swings the rock again, and this time he aims for one of the thing's eyes. The eye is black and bulbous, and it pops like overripe fruit when the rock connects. The beast's tail lashes out blind, and the barb catches Jae-won across the left forearm. The arm that was already dead weight and useless, and he doesn't even feel it. What he does feel is the snap when the impact spins him around and his left forearm bends the wrong way. Bone doesn't break through the skin, but it's close, and his hand hangs at an angle that makes no sense. Jae-won screams, and it's the first sound he's made since he landed in this hell. The scorpion beast is thrashing now, and 2 of its legs are tangled together, and it's losing its balance. Jae-won crawls toward a rusted spire jutting from the sand 3 yards away. The spire is maybe 4 feet tall, and it's flaking red oxide, and it looks sharp at the tip. He hears the creature right itself behind him, and he doesn't look back. His right hand finds the spire, and he uses it to haul himself upright. The metal is hot, and the rust flakes dig into his palm like tiny blades. The scorpion beast charges, and it's slower now with one eye gone and black ichor streaming down its face. Jae-won waits until the last possible second, and then he drops. He drops flat onto his back, and the thing's momentum carries it straight into the spire. The sharp tip punches through the creature's underbelly and through whatever passes for its heart. The shriek that comes out of it dies halfway and becomes a wet gurgle. Jae-won lies there with the dead scorpion beast impaled above him, and black ichor drips onto his chest. He doesn't move for a long time. The black sun doesn't move either, and the violet fire ring pulses once and goes still. Jae-won rolls out from under the corpse, and his left arm flops, and the new break sends jagged glass through his shoulder. He looks at the arm and he knows it's useless now, in a way that's different from before. Before it was dead weight, but now it's dead weight that's also broken, and even breathing wrong hurts it. He finds the rock he dropped, and he looks at the dead scorpion beast, and he makes a choice. He spends the next hour butchering the thing with a rock that gets duller with every cut. The chitin is too hard to crack, so he goes for the joints and the soft tissue underneath. He peels back a section of the shell, and the meat inside is pale and stringy, and it smells like copper. Jae-won eats it raw, and the taste is so foul his stomach tries to reject it immediately. He forces it down anyway, and then he forces down more. The fluid from the meat is thick and bitter, but it's moisture, and he needs moisture more than he needs dignity. When he's done, he tears a strip of chitin from the underbelly and uses it like a scoop. He digs into the sand and goes down, and the sand gets darker as he goes deeper. 3 feet down the sand is damp, and he presses his face into it and sucks the moisture out like a man dying of thirst. Because that's exactly what he is. He gathers more damp sand into the chitin scoop, and he squeezes it against his lips and drinks what drips out. It's gritty, and it tastes like iron and ash, and he doesn't care. The black sun still hasn't moved, and Jae-won realizes it never has, and maybe it never will. He tears a strip of cloth from what's left of his shirt, and he ties his left arm against his chest. The angle is still wrong, and the bones grind when he tightens the knot, and his vision whites out for a few seconds. When he can see again, he looks at the ridge, and the ridge is still 200 yards away. He starts walking, and this time he doesn't stop. Every step sends lightning through his ankle, and his ribs scream, and his left arm bounces against his chest. He uses the rusted spire as a walking stick, and it's heavy, but it's something to lean on. He reaches the black rock ridge, and he drags himself over it, and he sees what's on the other side. A valley spreads out below him, and at the bottom of the valley, there's a thin ribbon of silver. Water, and it's moving. And it's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. Jae-won practically falls down the slope, and his ankle rolls 3 times, and each time he catches himself on the spire. The slope flattens out into a basin of cracked red clay, and the stream cuts through the center of it. He drops to his knees at the edge of the water, and he sees his reflection, and he freezes. The face staring back at him isn't the face of a 70-year-old man. It's the face of a 90-year-old corpse that someone forgot to bury. His cheeks are hollow caves, and his eyes are sunk deep in their sockets, and the skin is stretched so thin he can see the shape of his skull. His hair is completely white now, and it's falling out in patches. The wound on his ribs is an angry red, and the skin around it is already turning black at the edges. He looks at his reflection, and the reflection looks back, and neither of them recognizes what they see. Jae-won drinks until his stomach cramps, and then he drinks more. The water is cold and clean, and it tastes like nothing, and that nothing is the best thing he's ever tasted. He soaks the strip of cloth from his shirt, and he presses it against the claw wounds on his ribs. The cold water numbs the burn of the ichor, and he feels a tiny fraction of the pain recede. He sits by the stream and he counts what he has left. 1 broken arm tied to his chest, and 1 dead leg below the knee. 3 broken ribs at minimum, and a gash in his side that's going to kill him if infection sets in. No food except the stringy scorpion meat he managed to choke down, and no shelter and no way home. And then, he feels it. It's not a sound and it's not a sight. And it's not any sense he can name. It's a pull deep in his chest, like someone tied a thread to his sternum and is tugging it from very far away. Jae-won closes his eyes, and the pull is still there, and it points in a direction. East across the stream toward a flat expanse of cracked clay that stretches to the horizon. He opens his eyes, and he looks east, and he sees a dark shape in the distance. It's impossibly far, and the heat shimmer makes it waver, but it's there. A spire of black stone, rising from the desert like a needle driven through the world's skin. He knows what it is without knowing how he knows. The thread in his chest is connected to something in that tower, and the something is connected to the pistol. His sister's soul and Lee's sacrifice, and every bullet he ever fired, are somewhere inside that dark spire. Jae-won forces himself to his feet, and his reflection in the stream shatters into ripples. He doesn't know how far the tower is, and he doesn't know if he can make it. But the pull in his chest is the only direction he has, and so he follows. He crosses the stream, and the water is shallow and cold, and it numbs his right foot for a few blessed seconds. The clay on the other side is harder than the sand, and walking is slightly easier, and slightly still means agony. He walks for what feels like hours, and the black sun never moves, and the spire never gets closer. His body is running on scorpion meat and spite, and the spite is starting to run out. Cracked clay gives way to loose red gravel, and every step slides, and his ankle rolls again. And this time he doesn't catch himself. He hits the gravel face first, and the impact rattles his broken ribs, and he screams into the dirt. He can't get up. He tries, and his one good arm won't push him upright, and his right leg won't support his weight. Jae-won lies in the gravel, and the black sun stares down, and the violet fire ring pulses like a heartbeat. He thinks about Mira, and he thinks about Lee, and he thinks about the 400 students at Celestia. He thinks about the headmaster standing in the amphitheater with a pistol that contains his sister's soul. The thought doesn't give him strength, but it gives him something else. It gives him the cold certainty that he cannot die here, and he cannot die now, because he is the only person left who knows the truth. He rolls onto his back, and the sky is empty and black, and the violet-ringed sun is still at its apex. He's going to die here, and no one in any world will ever know what happened to him. His eyes close, and the pull in his chest is still there, and it's getting fainter. And then a shadow falls across his face. Jae-won opens his eyes, and a figure stands over him. And the figure is hooded and cloaked in gray fabric. The figure kneels, and the hood tilts, and a pair of dark eyes study him from a face that's weathered and lined. The face of a woman maybe 40 years old, with a scar that runs from her left temple to her jaw. She says something in a language Jae-won has never heard, and the words are rough and clipped. He tries to answer, and what comes out is a croak that sounds like sandpaper on gravel. The woman reaches into her cloak and pulls out a water skin and presses it to his lips. The water is lukewarm, and it tastes faintly of leather, and it's the second best thing he's ever tasted. She lets him drink for a few seconds, and then she pulls the water skin back and studies him again. A second figure appears behind her, and this one is taller and broader, and carrying a spear made of black metal. The second figure says something, and the woman answers without looking away from Jae-won. She points at the strip of chitin he's still clutching, and she points at the claw wounds on his ribs. Then she says something that sounds like a question, and her tone shifts, and Jae-won understands the tone, if not the words. She's asking him if he killed the scorpion beast himself. He nods, and the motion sends pain through his neck and into his skull. The woman looks at the broken arm tied to his chest, and the ankle that's swollen to twice its normal size. He looks at his face, and he knows what she's seeing, and she knows what he is. A dead man walking. The woman stands and says something to the spear carrier, and the spear carrier argues back. Their voices rise, and Jae-won catches one word that gets repeated 3 times. It sounds like a name or a title, and it's spoken with the kind of fear people usually reserve for natural disasters. The spear carrier gestures at Jae-won and shakes his head, and the woman's jaw tightens. She points east, toward the black spire, and she says something sharp and final. The spear carrier goes silent. The woman kneels again, and she looks at Jae-won and she taps her chest twice. She says a word, and it's clearly her name, and she says it slowly so he can catch it. Na-hyun-soo. Jae-won tries to say his own name, but what comes out is barely a whisper. Na-hyun-soo leans closer, and he says it again, and this time she nods. She gestures at the spire in the distance, and she says something that includes the word Jae-won heard during the argument. Feared word, and the revered word, and the word that made the spear carrier shut his mouth. Jae-won doesn't understand the language, but he understands the context. The black spire belongs to someone, or something that this world remembers. She helps him sit up, and the spear carrier hands her a strip of dried meat that tastes like smoke and salt. Jae-won chews it slowly, and the salt stings his cracked lips, and it's the best meal he's ever had. Na-hyun-soo watches him eat, and her expression is unreadable. She says something that sounds like a warning, and she points at the black spire again. Then she taps her chest, and she taps Jae-won's chest, and she points west, away from the spire. Jae-won shakes his head, and he points east, and he says the only word that matters. Gate. Na-hyun-soo's eyes widen, and she stares at him like he just spoke her own language backward. She says something rapid and urgent to the spear carrier, and this time the spear carrier doesn't argue. Spear carrier hauls Jae-won upright, and the woman takes his good arm over her shoulder. They move slowly across the gravel, and Jae-won's feet drag, and his ankle screams, and he doesn't care. Na-hyun-soo's camp is a shallow cave carved into the base of a rust-colored mesa, about half a mile from where he fell. The camp has a fire pit ringed with black stones, and 3 bedrolls made of some kind of rough hide. A third figure is already there, and this one is young and thin, and missing most of his right ear. The kid stares at Jae-won with open terror, and Na-hyun-soo says something that makes him relax slightly. They lay Jae-won on one of the bedrolls, and Na-hyun-soo crouches beside him. She pulls back the strip of cloth on his ribs, and she makes a sound that doesn't require translation. The wounds are infected, and the black edges are spreading, and the smell is starting to turn. She reaches into a pouch on her belt and pulls out a small clay jar sealed with wax. She breaks the seal, and the smell that comes out is sharp and herbal, and it stings his nostrils. She smears a paste across his ribs, and the paste is cold, and then it's burning, and then it's cold again. Jae-won grits his teeth, and he doesn't scream because he's screamed enough for one day. Na-hyun-soo works in silence, and when she's done, she wraps the wound with clean cloth from her own supplies. She sits back on her heels, and she points at the spire, and she asks a question. Jae-won doesn't need to understand the words to know what she's asking. Why does a dying old man from nowhere want to go to the most dangerous place in this world? He points at his chest, and he points at the spire, and he draws a line between them with his finger. The thread and the pull, and the connection he can't explain. Na Hyun-soo stares at him for a long moment. Then she speaks slowly in her rough, clipped language, and she draws in the sand with a stick. She draws a tower, and she draws a figure in the tower, and she draws a line through the figure. Dead and gone and buried centuries ago. She draws a circle around the tower, and she draws small figures moving toward it, and she puts an X through every single one. She taps the drawing and she looks at him, and the message is clear as glass. Whoever built that spire died a long time ago, and everyone who's gone looking for what's inside has died too. Jae-won looks at the drawing, and he looks at Na Hyun-soo. He takes the stick from her hand, and he draws a second figure next to the first one at the tower. He draws an arrow from his chest to the tower, and he draws the connection that won't let him go. Then he draws a single word in the sand in his own language, and he points at it. Gate. He points at himself, and he points at the sky, and he draws a line from the tower back the way he drew it. He doesn't know if she understands, and he doesn't know if it's even possible. Na Hyun-soo studies the drawing, and she studies his face, and she makes a decision. She says something to the spear carrier, and the spear carrier sighs and nods. She says something to the kid with the missing ear, and the kid starts packing supplies. Na Hyun-soo turns back to Jae-won, and she taps the tower on the drawing. She says something that might be a warning, or a promise, or a threat. Jae-won nods, and the pull in his chest tugs a little harder. Somewhere in a black spire on the other side of a hostile wasteland, there's a way to reopen the gate. He doesn't know how, and he doesn't know if his body will hold. But Na Hyun-soo is packing supplies, and the kid is putting out the fire, and the spear carrier is checking his weapon. Jae-won has been alone since the headmaster threw him through the vortex. He's not alone anymore. The camp stirs before the black sun finishes its pulse. Na Hyun-soo kicks sand over the last embers, and the kid with the missing ear shoulders a pack made of stitched hide. The spear carrier tests his weapon's balance and nods once. Jae-won tries to stand on his own, and his right leg buckles instantly. The spear carrier catches him before he hits the gravel and hauls him up without a word. Na Hyun-soo points east, and she draws a line in the air with her finger. The black spire is 2 days away if his body holds, and 3 if it doesn't. Jae-won grips the rusted spire he's been using as a walking stick, and he starts limping. The first hour is brutal, and the second hour is worse. His left arm throbs inside its cloth sling, and every step sends a spike of pain from his shattered ankle up through his hip. The pull in his chest keeps him moving, and that's the only reason he doesn't stop. The kid walks beside him and keeps glancing at his face like he's looking at a walking corpse, which isn't far off, and Jae-won knows it. They cross a flat pan of cracked red clay that crunches underfoot like old bone. Na Hyun-soo calls a halt when the black sun pulses again, and the violet ring flares bright. She points at a cluster of rock formations ahead and says something about shelter. The spear carrier scoffs, but he follows her lead, and that tells Jae-won who's really in charge here. They reach the rocks as the temperature drops, and the kid gets a small fire going with a spark striker. Jae-won collapses against a boulder, and his chest heaves and his vision swims. Na Hyun-soo crouches beside him and checks the bandages on his ribs. The herbal paste has stopped the black edges from spreading, but the smell is still wrong. She says something that sounds like a question, and she taps the spire he's been carrying. Jae-won doesn't have the words, so he just points east. She studies his face for a long moment, and then she speaks slowly and deliberately. She draws in the dirt again, and this time she draws the tower, and she draws a symbol on its side. A symbol Jae-won recognizes. It's the same rune that was etched into the barrel of his pistol. His heart slams against his ribs, and he grabs the stick from her hand. He points at the rune, and he points at his own chest, and he looks at her with a question that doesn't need translation. Na Hyun-soo's expression shifts, and she trades a glance with the spear carrier. She draws another symbol next to the first one, and this one is different, and older, and more complex. She taps the second symbol, and she taps her own chest, and she holds up 4 fingers. 4 people in her group once, and now only 3. And the rune is the reason why. Jae-won stares at the drawing, and the connection slams into place like a bullet finding its mark. The gatemaker didn't just build a portal, and the pistol isn't just a weapon. It's all part of the same twisted machine, and it's been destroying lives on both sides of the gate for centuries. Na Hyun-soo stands, and she points at the spire, and she makes it clear they're moving at first light. Nobody argues, and the fire burns low. And the kid passes out strips of dried meat that taste like ash and salt. Jae-won chews mechanically, and he stares at the black needle on the horizon, and the pull in his chest tightens another notch. Dawn comes without a sunrise because the black sun never moves. The violet ring pulses once, and Na Hyun-soo kicks everyone awake, and they break camp in silence. The second day is longer than the first, and Jae-won's body is falling apart in real time. His right leg drags, and his left arm swells inside the sling, and the claw marks on his chest weep a thin, clear fluid that stings when the air touches it.
The kid keeps watching him, and at one point, he offers Jae-won a strip of leather to bite down on.
Jae-won takes it, and he clamps it between his teeth, and he keeps moving. The terrain shifts as they get closer, and the red sand gives way to black rock that's sharp and volcanic and cuts through the soles of his boots. The spire grows larger with every hour, and now he can see details. It's not a natural formation, and it's not built from stone. It's made of the same obsidian-like material as the pedestal where he first found the pistol. The surface is covered in runes that glow faintly, even in the gray light of the black sun. Na Hyun-soo stops at the base of a ridge, and she points at a dark opening in the spire's flank, about 200 yards away. The entrance is a jagged crack that looks like it was torn open rather than built. He says something to the spear carrier, and he moves ahead to scout, while the rest of them wait in the cover of the rocks. The kid is shaking, and Jae-won can see the sweat on his face and the way his hands won't stay still. Whatever's inside that spire killed one of their group, and the kid is reliving it right now. The spear carrier returns after 10 minutes, and he reports in a low, urgent tone. Na Hyun-soo's jaw tightens, and she turns to Jae-won, and she points at the entrance, and she draws a line across her throat. Something's in there, and it's alive and it's waiting. Jae-won pushes himself upright on his walking stick, and he doesn't hesitate. He's come too far and lost too much. And if the Gatemaker's core is inside that tower, then that's where he's going. Na Hyun-soo sees the look on his face, and she doesn't try to stop him. She pulls a short curved blade from her belt, and she hands it to him handle first. It's not a pistol, and it won't kill a mage with one shot, but it's better than a rusted piece of scrap metal. Jae-won takes the blade, and he weighs it in his good hand, and he nods his thing. They move toward the entrance in a tight formation, and the spear carrier takes point, and the kid stays close to Na Hyun-soo. The crack in the spire swallows them whole, and the temperature drops 20 degrees in 3 steps. Walls are smooth and black, and covered in more of those runes that pulse with a faint, sickly blue light. Jae-won recognizes the color, and his stomach clenches. It's the same blue as the headmaster's personal ward, and the same blue as the vortex that swallowed him. They advance into a wide circular chamber, and the ceiling vanishes into darkness above them. The floor is a single seamless slab of obsidian, and at the center of the room sits a stone golem the size of a small house. The golem is dormant, and its eyes are dark, and its body is covered in identical runes to the ones on the walls. Na Hyun-soo grabs Jae-won's arm, and she points at the runes, and she shakes her head. She's seen this before, and she knows what happens when someone gets too close. Jae-won studies the golem, and he studies the runes, and something clicks in his exhausted brain. The runes on the golem's chest are arranged in the exact same pattern as the inscription on the pistol's barrel. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't just similar technology. The pistol was literally built from the same blueprint as this golem, and that means the weaknesses might be the same too. He points at the golem's joints, and he points at his own shoulder, and he points at his knee. Na Hyun-soo frowns, and then understanding dawns on her face. He relays the information to the spear carrier, and he nods and shifts his grip on his weapon. They circle the chamber, and the golem stays dormant, and the runes keep pulsing. Jae-won spots a doorway on the far side, and beyond it, he can see a staircase spiraling upward. That's where the core is, and the pull in his chest is screaming at him to move. He takes one step toward the doorway, and the golem's eyes ignite with that same sickly blue fire. The chamber shakes as the thing rises to its full height, and its mouth opens, and a sound like grinding boulders fills the air. The spear carrier doesn't wait, and he lunges forward and drives his weapon into the golem's knee joint. The strike is perfect, and the spear sinks deep into a seam between 2 stone plates, and the golem staggers. Jae-won shouts, and he points at the chest, and Na Hyun-soo understands immediately. She darts in low and fast, and she slashes at the runes on the golem's torso with her blade. The golem swings a massive arm, and she throws herself backward, and the arm smashes into the floor and sends cracks spiderwebbing across the obsidian. The spear carrier yanks his weapon free, and he strikes again and again, targeting the same knee joint. Jae-won limps forward on his walking stick, and he's useless in a fight, but he can still direct. He points at a rune on the golem's left shoulder, and he shouts, and Na Hyun-soo adjusts her angle and attacks. The golem pivots, and its arm catches the spear carrier across the chest and sends him flying into the wall. He slumps to the ground, and he doesn't get up. The kid screams something, and Na Hyun-soo's face goes cold with fury, and she redoubles her attack. Jae-won sees the golem's chest runes flicker, and he knows that's the weak point, and it's now or never. He drops his walking stick, and he lunges forward, and his right leg screams in protest, and his ankle gives way completely. He falls forward onto the golem's leg, and he drives Na Hyun-soo's curved blade into the flickering rune on the creature's chest. The blade sinks into the hilt, and the rune shatters and blue light explodes outward. Golem freezes mid-swing, and its eyes flicker and die,
and the whole chamber goes silent. Jae-won hangs from the blade, and his body is screaming, and he can't feel his right leg at all now. Na-hyun-soo pulls him off the golem, and she drags him toward the doorway while the kid helps the spear carrier to his feet. The spear carrier is alive, and he's coughing blood, and he's got at least 2 broken ribs, but he's standing. They climb the spiral staircase, and Jae-won has to crawl because his leg won't support any weight. Stairs go on forever, and the pull in his chest gets stronger with every step. They emerge into a small chamber at the top of the spire, and the walls are lined with shelves, and the shelves are filled with journals and artifacts and strange crystalline devices. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal identical to the one under the academy, sits a crystal sphere the size of a human heart. It pulses with a soft golden light, and Jae-won feels the pull in his chest lock onto it like a magnet. This is the Gatemaker's core, and it's still active after centuries, and it's the key to everything. Na-hyun-soo stares at the sphere, and there's fear in her eyes. And there's something else too, hope and grief and a desperate need to undo something that can't be undone. And Jae-won recognizes that look because he's worn it himself for 3 years. He drags himself to the pedestal, and he reads the inscription carved into its base. The language is ancient, and it's not his own. But the words resolve in his mind like a key turning in a lock. A seed of creation is required to activate the core, and the seed must be freely given, and the seed must carry the weight of a soul. Jae-won stares at the inscription, and he stares at the crystal sphere, and he knows what he has to do. The pistol is gone, and Lee is gone, and Mira is gone. But the soul link is still there. The thread that connects him to the weapon, and through the weapon to his sister, and through his sister to the gate itself. He closes his eyes and he concentrates, and he reaches for that thread with everything he has left. The crystal sphere begins to glow brighter, and the golden light fills the chamber. And Na-hyun-soo takes a step back. Jae-won feels the connection, and it's not enough. And the sphere is demanding more than he can give. He pours everything into it, and his grief and his rage and his guilt and his desperate, stubborn refusal to die. The sphere pulses, and a crack of light appears in the air above the pedestal. It's a portal, and it's small, and it's unstable, and it flickers like a candle in a storm. Through the crack, Jae-won can see the academy's basement, and the rubble, and the bodies, and the devastation. The portal won't hold long, and the sphere's light is already dimming. Na-hyun-soo looks at the portal, and she looks at Jae-won, and she makes a choice. She grabs him by the collar, and she hauls him to his feet, and she shoves him toward the crack of light. He tries to resist, and he tries to pull her with him, but she shakes her head. She says something in her rough, clipped language, and he doesn't need a translation. She's staying, and the kid is staying, and the spear carrier is staying, and this is their world and their fight. The portal flickers, and Jae-won has no more time. He reaches out, and he grabs Na-hyun-soo's hand, and he squeezes once, and then he lets go, and he falls through the crack of light. The journey is instant and eternal, and it rips through him like a bullet through a barrier. He slams onto the cold stone floor of the academy basement, and the portal snaps shut behind him with a sound like a gunshot. He lies on his back, and he stares at the ceiling, and he breathes. The pull in his chest is gone, and the thread is severed, and he's back. He's broken, and he's dying, and he's alone, and he's back. Somewhere above him, the academy is in ruins, and the headmaster has won, and the pistol is waiting. He lands hard on cold stone, and everything hurts at once, and he can't move his right leg, and his left arm is still tied to his chest in the claw. Marks across his ribs scream with every breath. His vision swims, and the ceiling above him is cracked and familiar, and he knows this ceiling because he's stared at it before. The academy basement. He's back. The portal is gone, and the pull in his chest is gone, and the soul link is severed, and he is alone in the dark. He lies there for a long time, and his body is a ruin, and his heart is beating wrong, and he can feel the age sunk deep into his bones like cold water. He rolls onto his side, and the pain in his ribs makes him gasp, and he uses his good arm to push himself upright against a stone pillar. The basement is silent, and the silence is worse than screaming, because it means the ritual is over, and he doesn't know what's left. He grabs a chunk of broken masonry, and he uses it as a crutch, and he drags himself toward the staircase. Each step takes 10 seconds, and the stairs are steep, and he climbs them one at a time, and he counts them to keep from passing out. 23 steps, and every single one is a negotiation with a body that wants to quit. He reaches the top, and he shoves the door open with his shoulder, and he steps into the main corridor of the academy, and what he sees stops him cold. The walls are scorched, and the windows are blown out, and the floor is covered in bodies. Students in Celestia uniforms, and they're sprawled where they fell, and some of them are twitching, and most of them aren't. The air smells like ozone and copper, and something burnt that used to be alive. The ritual didn't fail,
The ritual tore through everything. He limps down the corridor, and his makeshift crutch leaves gouges in the stone. And he doesn't look at the faces of the dead, because if he looks, he'll stop. And if he stops, he'll never move again. The main hall is a slaughterhouse, and the banners are torn, and the marble floors are slick with blood, and the chandeliers are still swaying from whatever force ripped through this place. He heads toward the headmaster's office, and the door is open, and the frame is cracked, and the whole building groans like a wounded animal. He steps inside, and the office is trashed, and the bookshelves are toppled, and the desk is still standing. And on the desk, and placed there like a gift, and waiting for him, and gleaming with that sick blue glow, is the pistol. He stares at it, and his heart stutters, and he knows this is a trap, and he knows the headmaster left it for him, and he doesn't care. He limps to the desk, and he picks it up, and the grip is cold and familiar, and the weight of it settles into his palm like it belongs there. The magazine is loaded, and he checks it with trembling fingers, and there are 4 bullets. 4 rounds of impossible glowing light, and one of them pulses with a pure golden radiance. And he knows that bullet. Lee's bullet. Her sacrifice is still in the chamber. A note is pinned under the pistol, and he picks it up, and the handwriting is elegant and precise. And the message is 4 words. Welcome back. I've gone to your new home. Jae-won stares at the words, and his grip tightens on the note, and his knuckles go white. The headmaster knew he'd come back. The headmaster left him a loaded gun and a trail to follow. And this isn't a trap. This is an invitation. He searches the office, and he finds the portal device on the floor near the shattered window. And it's a small disc of black metal covered in runes. It hums with residual power. The headmaster used it to cross over, and he didn't bother to destroy it. Arrogance or design. And Jae-won doesn't care which. He picks up the disc and he studies the runes, and they match the pattern on the pistol's barrel, and the pattern on the golem's chest, and the pattern on the gatemaker's core. Everything connects to everything else, and it always has. He activates the disc, and the runes flare blue, and a portal tears open in the middle of the office. And it's bigger than the one in the spire, and it's stable, and it yawns like a wound in reality. Through the portal, he can see red sand and a black sun, and the jagged silhouette of the black spire in the distance. The headmaster is waiting for him in that wasteland, and he's got the gatemaker's core, and he's got Mira's soul, and he's got 20 years of stolen life force, and he's planning to merge the 2 worlds. Jae-won has 4 bullets and a broken body, and nothing left to lose. He steps through the portal, and the transition is instant and violent, and he lands on his feet, and his right leg buckles immediately, and he crashes to his knees in the red sand. The black sun hangs motionless above him, and the violet fire ring pulses, and the cold gray light washes everything flat and dead. The portal snaps shut behind him, and he's back in the wasteland, and the directional pull in his chest is gone because the soul link is severed. And he's navigating on instinct now. He forces himself upright, and he scans the horizon, and the black spire looms in the distance. And at its base, there's a flicker of blue light. Headmaster's magic, and it's unmistakable. And it's close. Jae-won starts moving, and every step is agony, and his makeshift crutch sinks into the sand, and the wind has picked up, and it stings his face and his eyes. The terrain changes as he walks, and the red sand gives way to sharp black volcanic rock, and the same terrain he crossed with Na Hyun-soo and the spear carrier. He remembers her face, and he remembers her choice, and he remembers the way she shoved him through the portal without hesitation. She's still here somewhere, unless the headmaster found her first. He pushes the thought down, and he focuses on the flickering blue light, and he walks faster. The blue light pulses, and it's coming from the entrance to the spire. And Jae-won can see movement, and he knows that silhouette. Tall and straight-backed, and wrapped in robes that billow in the hot wind. And it's the headmaster, and he's standing over something on the ground. Jae-won gets closer, and his heart drops into his stomach, and the something on the ground is a body. Na Hyun-soo's body, and she's not moving. And the kid is nowhere in sight, and the spear carrier is gone. The headmaster turns, and he sees Jae-won approaching, and he smiles. That same calm, benevolent smile he's worn for 20 years, and it makes Jae-won want to empty every bullet into his face right now. The headmaster spreads his hands, and the gatemaker's core floats beside him, and it's glowing bright gold. And it's been activated, and the pulse of energy coming off it is sickening. He basically says he was hoping Jae-won would make it back in time, and he gestures at Na Hyun-soo's body, and he says, she was very informative while she lasted. He says the kid and the spear carrier are still alive, and they're inside the spire, and he'll deal with them after he's finished. He says the core is ready, and the seed has been planted, and all he needs now is the pistol. The key,
The final piece. Jae-won raises the pistol, and he aims it at the headmaster's chest, and his hand is steady, even though his body is falling apart.
The headmaster laughs and he says that won't work.
And Jae-won knows he's right.
The personal defense ward still shimmers around him, and that sick blue light is stronger here, and it's feeding off the core's energy and a normal bullet won't penetrate it. But one of these bullets isn't normal.
Jae-won chambers the golden bullet, and he feels Lee's presence. And he feels her sacrifice, and he feels every person the headmaster has murdered to get here. The headmaster's smile flickers, and he says that's impossible. And he says the life transfer ritual went wrong. And Jae-won explains, and he basically tells the guy that Lee gave him this bullet, and it's got her name on it. He fires, and the golden bullet leaves the barrel, and the sound is like a bell ringing, and the air splits open, and the headmaster's ward shatters like glass. The bullet punches through his shoulder, and he staggers, and the core wobbles in the air, and the blue light flickers. Jae-won chambers a second round, and the headmaster snarls, and he raises his hand, and a wave of telekinetic force slams into Jae-won, and he flies backward, and he hits the black rock, and his ribs scream, and his vision goes white. He forces himself up, and the headmaster is advancing, and his shoulder is bleeding black ichor, and his face is twisted with rage, and he's not smiling anymore. He says Jae-won has ruined everything, and he says he'll tear him apart and feed his soul to the core himself. Jae-won fires the second bullet, and the headmaster deflects it with a pulse of magic, and the bullet ricochets off a rock spire and kicks up red sand. Headmaster closes the distance, and he grabs Jae-won by the throat, and he lifts him off the ground, and his grip is like iron. Jae-won can't breathe, and his legs kick uselessly, and the pistol is still in his hand, and he's got 2 bullets left. The headmaster says he's going to enjoy this, and he says he'll make it last. And Jae-won does the only thing he can think of. He shoves the pistol against the headmaster's chest at point-blank range, and he pulls the trigger. Jae-won looks at the gatemaker's core, and it's glowing brighter. And the pulse is becoming a steady hum, and the black sun above them is starting to crack. A fissure of darkness splits the sky, and it's growing, and the violet fire ring is flickering, and the world is starting to tear at the seams. Headmaster falls to his knees, and he's still laughing, and he says Jae-won can't undo it. And he says, the 2 worlds will become one and everything will burn. Jae-won crawls toward the core, and it hovers at chest height, and the golden light is blinding, and he can feel the heat coming off it like a furnace. He studies the runes on its surface, and they're the same pattern he's seen a dozen times now, and he knows what to do. The inscription in the spire said the seed must be freely given and must carry the weight of a soul, and the headmaster used grief and stolen life force to power it. But Jae-won knows grief better than the headmaster ever will. He closes his eyes, and he reaches for the thread that used to connect him to the pistol, and it's severed. But the scar is still there, and the memory of the connection is still there. He pours everything into the core, and he pours his grief for Mira, and his grief for Lee, and his grief for every student who died in the amphitheater, and his grief for Na-hyun-soo, who pushed him through a portal and stayed behind. He pours his rage and his guilt, and his stubborn refusal to let the headmaster win. And the core responds, and the golden light shifts, and it pulses in a new rhythm, and it's listening. The headmaster lunges at him, and he's got a dagger in his hand, and Jae-won doesn't have time to aim, and he fires the last bullet from the hip. The 4th round catches the headmaster in the throat, and he gurgles, and he drops the dagger, and he falls face first into the red sand. He twicks once, and he's done, and that's it. And the headmaster is dead, and the core is still pulsing, and the merge is still reversing. Jae-won watches the fissure in the sky close, and the black sun solidifies, and the violet fire ring steadies, and the core's light dims to a soft, gentle gold. The merge is stopped, and the 2 worlds are separate, and the gate between them is sealed, and it's over. Jae-won collapses onto his back, and he stares at the sky, and he breathes, and he's got no bullets left, and he's got no pistol because it's empty, and headmaster is dead, and he should feel victorious. He just feels tired. He hears footsteps, and he turns his head, and the kid is running toward him from the spire entrance, and the spear carrier is limping behind her. They're alive, and they're battered, and the spear carrier's ribs are still broken, and the kid's face is streaked with tears and dirt, and she drops to her knees beside Jae-won, and she says something in her rough, clipped language, and he doesn't need a translation. She's thanking him, and he shakes his head, and he points at Na-hyun-soo's body, and he says it wasn't him. The kid's face crumples, and she goes to Na-hyun-soo, and she kneels beside her, and she doesn't cry, and she just sits there and holds her hand. The spear carrier lowers himself to the ground, and he stares at the headmaster's body, and he asks a question.
And Jae-won understands the tone, even if he doesn't understand the words. He's asking if it's over. Jae-won nods, and he closes his eyes, and he lets the exhaustion take him. When he wakes up, he's inside the spire, and the kid has bandaged his ribs, and the spear carrier has splinted his leg, and they've laid him on a makeshift bed of old cloaks. The gatemaker's core sits on a shelf nearby, and it's still glowing faintly, and Jae-won can feel its presence. And it's different now. Calmer. It's not a weapon anymore, and it's not a tool for merging worlds, and it's just a source of light and warmth, and it's content to stay that way. The kid offers him water, and he drinks, and she tells him through gestures and broken words that the headmaster's body has been buried in the red sand, and the gate is closed, and the monsters have retreated. She says the spire is safe now, and the core is healing the land, and the black sun isn't cracking anymore. She says they can stay here and rebuild, and she asks if Jae-won will stay too. Jae-won looks at the core, and he looks at the kid, and he thinks about the academy, and he thinks about the bodies in the corridors, and he thinks about Mira and Lee and everyone who died to get him here. He could go back and he could find a way to reopen a portal, and he could return to his world and face the consequences of everything that happened. But his world doesn't need him anymore, and the headmaster is dead, and the gate project is destroyed, and there's nothing left for him there except ash and graves. He touches his chest where the soul link used to be, and there's no pull, and there's no grief, and there's just a scar where the thread was severed. He's free, and his body is old and broken, and he's got maybe a few years left at best, and he decides to spend them here. In this wasteland with this kid and this spear carrier, and the memory of Na-hyun-soo, and the quiet hum of the gatemaker's core, and the cold gray light of the black sun, tells the kid he'll stay, and she smiles, and it's the first smile he's seen in this world, and it's small, and it's tired, and it's real. The spear carrier nods, and he claps Jae-won on the shoulder, and it hurts, and Jae-won doesn't complain. Outside the spire, the red sand stretches to the horizon, and the black sun hangs motionless, and the sky is whole again. And somewhere far away, a phoenix flies toward the mountains, and its feathers trail golden light. Jae-won watches it go, and he feels the pistol's grip against his palm, and it's empty, and it's cold, and it's finally just a gun. He's got 4 spent casings on a shelf, and a dead man buried in the sand, and a promise kept, and a sister avenged, and all it cost was everything. And he'd pay it again. The kid hands him a bowl of water, and he drinks, and he breathes, and the world doesn't end. He's done.